Good morning. I'm just going to double check the numbers. We are only just quorate this morning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 members, which is the quorum. So members, unless anyone else from the committee does turn up, you are here till the end, because if you leave, I will have to stop the meeting.
You can lock the doors.
Yeah, absolutely.
I missed the coffee.
Yes, you could give us tea and cakes halfway through.
If that's what it takes to bribe you, you never know. Anyway, so officially good morning everybody and welcome to this meeting of the Eastern Area Planning Committee. Our area of remit covers the previous Purbeck District Council and most of the previous East Dorset District Council areas. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Tony Coombs and as you can see I'm chairman of this planning committee. If I can introduce our officer support team this morning. We have Lara Altree is our solicitor, Tim Cowell, Principal Planning Officer, Liz Adams, Planning Case Officer, Claire Hicks, Planning Case Officer, Naomi Shinkins, Planning Case Officer, Hugh Williams, Planning Case Officer, and David Northover, as always, our Committee Support Officer. We do have other staff from Dorset Council here this morning, and I bid them all a very warm welcome and 1 or 2 visitors. So good morning to you as well. So can I remind everybody that this meeting is being live streamed and that a copy of the recording of the meeting will be available on the website afterwards. And by attending this meeting, you do consent to being filmed. I would also like to thank the officers behind the scenes who are making this possible. So I'm also pleased to welcome the members of the public this morning to listen to the debate and the decisions being taken, and that you have the opportunity to address the committee directly in accordance with our procedures, which are on the agenda under item 4, public participation. You find that on page 15 of the agenda. I intend to take the planning applications in the order they're printed this morning. So I'm going to go through the apologies for absence, please. Shane Bartlett.
Present, Madam Chairman.
I don't need to go back
That's
to the old
apologies for absence.
I don't need to do that, do I?
The other way round.
The other way around.
Yes.
David, do we have any apologies for absence?
Everybody.
Yes, Chairman. We've had 5 apologies for absence from Councillors Dyer, Grange, Morgan, Robinson, Wright. Councillor Mike Barron hasn't indicated that he won't be here, but he hasn't got any.
Thank you very much for that. So, members, are there any declarations of pecuniary or other conflict of interest, bias or predetermination on any of the applications in front of us this morning? Alex.
Can I just state, because I don't think another ward member is coming to talk.
Can you put your microphone on, please?
Sorry. I always think my voice is loud enough. The final one on the agenda, Sandy Lane Upton, is in my ward. Mr. Bailey has been in communication with me by email regularly. I have an opinion, but I wouldn't vote on that one. It's the best way around.
So do you want to speak at the beginning as local member and then not take part in the debate?
I don't mind, but yes, I suppose that might be neater.
It's more transparent, I think. Okay, that's lovely. So we have the minutes of the meeting held. On the 6th of April, which is on pages 5 to 16 of your agenda. Are members happy that I sign them as a correct record of that meeting? My apologies for not being there. I had the dreaded COVID. Okay, I'll do that at the end of the meeting. So moving on to public participation, can I remind members of the public that this is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting? First, 3 members of the public, including any community or amenity group who have registered to speak for and against the application, including the applicant or their representative, that's a maximum of 6 in total, will be invited to address the committee. If the applicant or their representative registers to speak, then only the first 2 members of the public who wish to speak for the application may address the committee. MPs need to register in the same way and will count as one of the 6 speakers. Town and parish councils and ward members of Dorset Council who are not members of the committee and who wish to address us will be allowed to speak, providing they have given due notice. All requests to speak have to have been registered with Democratic Services by 8:30 a.m. on Monday, the 18th of July. And each speaker will be strictly limited to 3 minutes. So moving on to the applications, we have 5 applications before us today, and therefore the committee may run on. I'm hoping that we will be finished by 1:30, but at 1 o'clock I will take a vote as to whether you wish to take a lunch break or whether you wish to continue, depending on where we are on the agenda. Kim, have there been any requests for deferrals or withdrawals, please?
Madam Chair, no, there have been no requests for deferments or withdrawals. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the background information relating to the applications before us today has been made available for inspection by members prior to the meeting, and that covers consultations, objections and representations, as well as both the East Dorset and Purbeck local plans and the council's related policies. So just a bit of housekeeping. Can you please be aware of trip hazards this morning, as we seem to have various wires around the room. I don't really want to see anyone go flying. I will also invite the case officer to introduce their item, and members of the public, planning agents, applicants and town and parish councils who have registered to speak will be allowed to address in the following order: public against an application, public in support, the applicant or agent, the town or parish council, and then local member. Following the participation section of every item, I will ask officers if there are any salient points that they wish to clarify. I will then open up to members for questions and debate. In order to run the meeting smoothly, may I request that members of the committee direct any remarks and questions through myself as the chair, and I'll invite you to speak in turn. Can you please keep your laptop microphones on mute and ensure your device volume is set to 0 to maintain the audio quality? We do have room microphones dotted around. And please, can you use the desk microphone supplied? At the end of the debate, I will take a vote by the show of hands, and the voting detail will be recorded in the minutes if 3 or more members make the necessary request. So we will now move on to the first of the applications before us this morning. Be loaded up, and that is agenda item 6, PVOC 2022-03461, demolition of existing 3-storey plus plant room building and erection of a new 3-storey plus plant room building for the Dorset Police Force headquarters with associated parking without compliance with variation of condition 10 of planning permission P full 2021 04422. The development should be constructed to a minimum BREEAM standard rating of very good instead of excellent. And that's the Force headquarters, Dorset Innovation Park Access Road, Winfrith, Newborough, Dorset. Look forward to having a shorter intro on that. And for those that are looking at the agenda, it's pages 21 to 58. And I'm going to invite Hugh Williams to present this application.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Planning Commission PFUL 2021-04422 was granted in March this year, allowing construction of a replacement police force headquarters building. The permission was granted subject to various conditions, including a requirement that the development be constructed for BREEAM, a minimum BREEAM standard rating of excellent. The Commission is sought to await an application under Section 73 of the Planning Act to enable development to be constructed to a minimum BREEAM rating of very good, 1 rating down from the previously required excellent. The Force headquarters campus is located to the west of the Burton Cross, at the Burton Cross roundabout on the A352, a short distance to the west of Wall. Vehicle access to the campus is via the access road leaving the Dorset Innovation Park and a service access road that principally serves the headquarters campus, and which is also a public footpath. The way the to the London Waterloo Railway line passes to the north. There's an area of open countryside to the east, a sports playing field to the south, the Innovation Park to the west. The Red Edge planning application site area extends to approximately 1.2 hectares and consists of land and buildings within the southeastern corner of the headquarters campus. The aerial site context can be appreciated from the aerial photograph. The application site in the southeast section, the headquarters campus facility, service access road immediately to the east, the railway line passing to the north, and buildings and in the Innovation Park to the west. Wider surrounding areas predominantly rural in character, the nearest residential properties being located at East Burton, all more than 200 metres from the application site boundary. The application site is shown on inset 6 of the proposed map of its local plan, which comprising part of allocated employment site and also part located within an area of service flooding. The site is additionally located within 250 metres of a safeguarded waste facility identified in the adopted waste plan. That facility being the B4 complex to the west of the Innovation Park, which specialises in radioactive waste management, and also within a defined scientific interest risk assessment zone. That reflecting site's proximity to areas of designated heathland and also site's positioning within the full hydrological catchment area. No part of the application site itself is subject to either a statutory landscape or statutory nature conservation designation, and there are no designated heritage assets either within the application site or in the immediate vicinity site boundary. But the Dorset Constabulary War Memorial, which is located in the very southeastern section of the campus, constitutes a non-designated heritage asset and has been recommended to Historic England for statutory listing. The Exeter Planning Commission allows the demolition of a 3-storey building with amp room roof. The extent of the demolition being shown outlined red on these elevation drawings, buildings behind to be retained, and also then partial redevelopment of the application site with the replacement headquarters building accommodated within a reconfigured parking and servicing arrangement south of retained buildings. No changes proposed to either the architectural or the landscape design proposals. The only change proposed within the application being to condition 10 of the Exeter Planning Commission. That condition having been imposed to promote good design and sustainable construction in accordance with Policy D with the adopted plan. Policy D is reproduced in full at paragraph 12.22 of the application report and is a wide-ranging design policy addressing various design matters, including expectations that where applicable, development should achieve minimum BREEAM rating of very good or higher, with non-domestic buildings of 1,000 square metres more set to achieve a minimum BREEAM rating of excellent, unless viability constraints preclude achievement of that rating. Consequently, the primary issue in the consideration of the application proposal is whether construction to a minimum BREEAM rating of very good rather than excellent has been justified adequately. Set out in section 12 of the application report, BREEAM, for the Building and Research Establishment's environmental assessment methodology, comprises a science-based suite of validation and certification systems for achieving sustainable built environment, under which assessment is made in relation to a range of matters, including energy, waste, water, transport, pollution and ecology. This assessment methodology taking account of a wide range of factors that are measured against predetermined targets that reward performance which delivers social, economic or environmental benefit, and which produce component percentage scores that collectively determine the final rating of built development. Achievement of any BREEAM rating is purposefully challenging to push performance with certification at pass and good available below very good, excellent and outstanding. Threshold requirements for BREEAM ratings have been raised over time, such that very good is both a challenge, remains both a challenging and a very high sustainability rating. The application explains that the key reason for not being able to achieve an excellent score is due to the operational nature of the proposed building and site constraints that limit the number of achievable and available credits for proposed development. In particular, identifies issues relating to transport, pollution, ecology and health and well-being. Some percentage credits are simply not available to project, and others are limited by factors such as the site's location, servicing arrangements, or the delivery of the redevelopment of associated environmental enhancements. Supporting information further indicates that delivering an excellent score would require substantial expenditure over and above project budget, but such an uplift would have an obvious associated, obviously inferior impact on other force initiatives. Taking account of the information provided within the application, I am satisfied that the requested change from the minimum rating of excellent to very good has been adequately justified in accordance with the requirements of Policy D, but not unacceptably prejudice the overall sustainability of the proposed development. As was previously the case, replacement of the existing building better suit the operational requirements of Dorset Police, the building would perform to a higher level of sustainability and would be a benefit to the local economy. The architectural and landscape design proposals enhance the character and appearance of the locality, provide for safe and convenient means of access, a appropriate provision for the conservation of heritage assets, and would contribute to local biodiversity enhancement. Use of the proposed development by Dorset Police would also be to the benefit of communities across Dorset. In response to the application, Natural England has indicated that they are not able to fully assess the potential impacts of the proposal on statutory nature conservation sites or provide detailed advice on the application, and that it is for the local authority to determine whether or not the proposal is consistent with national and local policy. Amongst other matters, policy of the adopted local plan provides that new development will need to ensure that there are no adverse effects on the integrity of European sites, including the utilities and consideration of that matter is ongoing, and a further announcement relating to nutrient pollution in Poole Harbour is expected imminently, probably later this week. With consideration of that matter delay pending the announcement, it is appropriate the committee should resolve that following the conclusion of the Habitats Regulations assessment and the execution of the planning obligation, securing payment of final compensation in accordance with the Certified Biodiversity Plan submitted in support of the previous planning application, the head of planning be given delegated authority to grant planning permission, subject to the conditions set out in paragraph 16.1 of the report, or conditions to similar effect. Submissions have been made under the previous conditions that are still being considered, and it's quite likely that details that have already been submitted could be approved within modified versions of the recommended conditions. That concludes my presentation, but I'll also be happy to address any questions.
Thank you very much, Hugh. We have one member of the public that wishes to address us this morning, and that's Simon Crosby, who I understand is one of the architects. Morning.
Morning.
Indicated you will be limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. So yes, we're the architects appointed by Dorset Police for the delivery of this scheme. I really wanted to just reiterate, our brief from Dorset Police has always been to deliver a highly sustainable building for this site, to replace a very aged A10 building, which is beyond the end of its useful life and not really fit for purpose, and certainly not particularly sustainable as a building. We had early dialogue with the client and the local planning authority on how we achieve this. We deliver a number of police buildings, and whilst BREEAM is a good indicator of the sustainability of the building, it is a somewhat blunt tool that doesn't fit all scenarios. Police buildings are one of these scenarios. As an example, this building needs to be located on this site adjacent to the other buildings that the police use on the site itself. And actually, this loses us a number of credits by virtue of its location itself, and we don't have a choice over that. Said, in the drive to deliver a sustainable building, the design team have incorporated a number of sustainable solutions into the building to try and really deliver the best building we can for Dorset Police. These include photovoltaic cells to generate their own electricity, air source chillers, a strong thermal mass in the building to modulate energy use, mixed mode ventilation systems in there, a very highly efficient thermal envelope, a 40% reduction in water usage compared to the existing building, and an overall enhanced biodiversity for the overall site, plus some additional EV charging for electric vehicles. All of the elements are giving a significant improvement over the current building regulations, which will put the building in the top 25% of sustainable buildings in the UK. The Purbeck Design Guide states that buildings should achieve BREEAM Excellent unless there are clearly viable reasons why it shouldn't. We feel as the client and design team, we've justified in planning terms with the specifics of this project, and hope that the committee is supportive of these proposals to enable the development to move forwards and facilitate a modern, efficient police force. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hugh, was there anything from the public speaker that you wanted to pick up on at this point? Thank you. So I'll move across to members, please. David.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding of this is the current building is pretty much end of life, and it's no longer fit for purpose. The new building has to be on the same site, and there are constraints towards sustainability rating. When was the budget for this established? The argument seems to be that to make the building meet the requirement for excellent, which it should do because of its size, what that budgetary need to develop a building to that level was presumably understood right from the start by the applicants. Is it normal for us to say, there's a planning requirement, if you can't afford it, we'll let you off? I don't really get that.
Can you respond to that, please?
Certainly. Policy of the adopted local plan essentially driving all development to achieve a BREEAM rating of very good, which is itself a high standard. It shouldn't be, and because there are higher standards, please don't get the impression that achieving very good is easy. Lots of modern commercial buildings and other buildings do not achieve BREEAM very good. So the base requirement for very good is higher, well above building regulations requirements. Policy establishes an expectation that buildings over 1,000 square metres or non-domestic buildings over 1,000 square metres should achieve excellence unless there are viability reasons. Why not? Viability reasons in that context is not simply down to budget size. Ultimately, with no budget limitations, almost anything is practical. But viability of achieving the higher ratings under the BREEAM system does reflect site circumstances. Not every development you can't. Not every development can achieve 100% rating on BREEAM. Not all of the percentage points are available to every project. And to get to the excellent, you need to score a percentage above the threshold. The applicant has demonstrated is that they can't get to that threshold with the design building that has been approved. They did make that case in the original application, but officers felt there was insufficient information at that time to conclude that it wasn't practicable. From the additional information that's been provided in this application, I am satisfied that actually I don't think they can, unless they go back and effectively start with a complete redesign. And the police's position on that is that that's well beyond the budget limitations that they're working within, and that if were they to do so, it would have significant effect on other force initiatives, which I think is a material consideration because it's an important service.
Does that answer your concerns?
Extent, although I'm still a little aware that when they initially designed this building, they must know what standard they were going to be expected to achieve. If they didn't design the building with that budget to achieve that, I think it's a little difficult to see why they would just accept that budget constraint is a need to be a lesser standard. Albeit a very good standard, but it's not very right. Just a little concerned about that. It's reminiscent of people who promise affordable housing and claim a viability issue to drop it later. And there's a danger that we're constantly changing its standards in order to match the budgets of developers and applicants. That concerns me a little bit.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to my next speaker now, and that's Robin Cook.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I think there's no argument about it's incumbent upon any planning committee approving any decision to make sure for this type that they make sure they get the maximum efficiency and sustainability of the building. But as I read in the report, I think you could probably throw everything at this if you wanted to, if you had the money and all the other things to go with it. But there still wouldn't be a guarantee that you get this BREEAM excellent rating. It still could only be rated as possibly very good. So I think they work, what I can read and what we've heard, they work within confines of what they've got to achieve a standard which I think they're probably more than confident of getting with what they've done, as opposed to not damaging other areas of their activity, but doing something which at the end of the day might not guarantee what they're striving to get. So I understand what my colleague Councillor Took has said, but I think we have to consider that as a possibility should they ever go back to the drawing board and spend a lot more money, time and effort. Thank you.
Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask the officer, when we're talking about, what we're talking about here is the existing plans, the plans that were originally submitted, but they have now worked out that this will not get them to excellent. Because what I want to know is the difference between excellent and very good. Does this mean that they're actually going to miss out a few of the items that were on the original plans? Or is it just if they build to the original plans, they're not going to quite tick the boxes because of the site and that, and they would have to do extra engineering planning type work to bring it up to excellent? Because I don't know the difference between excellent and very good in this circumstance. You know, I know what the housing regulations are, but this is a step above. And we're also talking about a working office building as opposed to a house, which is much easier to picture.
The final certified rating of a completed development is a composite of assessment done at the design stage and assessment done at completion of scheme. To achieve a rating of outstanding, which is the highest, the score, percentage score overall needs to be 85%. For excellent, 70%, and very good, 55% or above. The range of issues that are covered, percentage points are available under each of the, I think it's 10 in total, categories, and there will be a maximum percentage of a potential score, contribution score. So for energy, in a particular feature, you might be able to accumulate 2%, but not all of that 2% will be available to every development. So of the two, you might only be able to pick up 1.5%, even if you do the absolute best you possibly can do. And through the design process, in designing to achieve BREEAM ratings, what you effectively look at is the available credits that are potentially available to the project, and you try to adapt the design to achieve as high a element of that those available to a final score. The previous application, the visions of policy D were highlighted at the pre-application stage on the previous application, and the previous application did address this requirement and highlighted that they did not consider that it was practical to achieve the excellent score. When the previous application was assessed, it was considered that insufficient information had been provided to guarantee that, and so the condition was imposed requiring excellent. The planning commission, the applicants highlighted that they didn't think they could comply with this condition, and therefore made inquiries as to what the alternative approaches were. This application is that alternative approach. The Planning Act allows for applications to be made for developments not in accordance with conditions attached to a previously granted. On such applications, the focus of the application is the conditions subject to which planning permission should be granted. It's open to the committee that if they feel that the proposal is unacceptable, to refuse planning permission, which in effect is saying that the condition previously imposed should remain. My advice to you is that the proposals to achieve very good with the justifications being set out in the application is in accordance with the development plan policy, and that this application should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. I do not regard this proposal as being contrary to policies of the adopted local plan. The question is simply has the requirement for very good rather than excellent been adequately justified, and having gone through the applicant's supporting statement, which does identify a whole series of points which have been assessed under the maximum achievable percentage, the available credits to this scheme, and the component that's being secured, and the reasons why some of the potentially achievable being realised. I am satisfied that the reasoning is sufficiently robust that it's been adequately justified.
Can I?
You want to come back?
Come back? That's a lovely explanation, but can I just have the original plan, which was the construction plan, which was given permission, has not changed. It's just that now looking at it, it may not achieve the level that they hoped it would at the time. But it's not that they're cutting anything out of the building or deciding to downgrade anything. Can I just have a yes or no, really?
There's been no change.
Thank you.
I think Kim wants to come in as well on this point, and then I'll bring Shane in.
May I assist members, if you look at the agenda, from paragraph 12.31 until 12.35, it sets out, Councillor Brenton, some of those points that it was expanded on. It includes things like some of the site constraints limiting the number of achievable and available credits, transport, pollution, ecology, health and well-being. And then it expands into the applicant's supporting statement to then set out the sustainability and the measures that the development will deliver. And he touched on those in his presentation. It's about SOC pumps and other things that impact the deliverability of the rating. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Williams, for an excellent report presentation. It was really good. I was going to ask questions around Breamstand as well, but I think what you give in your presentation answered some of my questions, and certainly the other questions that come from colleagues have gone some way to answering those questions I had around the Bream standard and why it was changing. Can I just go to 5.7? If I've read the report correctly and the police headquarters, how much longer does that statutory consultation period have to run? And due to the nature and scale of the application, is there any concerns of anything coming to light from that consultation post-committee decision? Now, I understand that we're going to be in a position where the head of planning will actually give the final go-ahead due to the ecology impacts and some of those question marks over that. So are officers comfortable that if we were to approve this today, there isn't anything in the background that might come to light? What's the problem?
At the time that the report was written, the consultation period was still running. It has since closed. There have been no further representations on the application, and there are no objections to the application. The issue with the need for habitats regulations assessment is primarily technical. It's a process that the council should go through as the competent authority, and I had anticipated being to complete that process sooner than today, on the basis of what I was being advised by Natural England when this report was written. But announcements have been put back. We were expecting an announcement yesterday. It may come today or later this week. But that is largely technical. If it were it to come to a point of preventing the approval of the application, this application would need to come back to committee. The planning obligation is simply securing compensatory payments in accordance with the applicant's proposals. So I'm really not anticipating that being difficult. I'm certainly not anticipating any further consultation responses that are likely to upset the head of planning's delegated ability to grant planning permission. Provided that's how the committee resolved.
Do you want to come back?
Madam Chairman, I think in the light of that and with the answers that have been given, I'm happy to move to a proposal. Madam Chairman, do you want to take that at this point in time?
Do I have a seconder? Robin Cook. Does anyone wish to speak on this application? In that case, I will move to the vote.
In accordance with the conditions it's laid out, Madam Chairman.
As set out in the agenda, and that gives delegation to the head of planning to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out below. The summary of the recommendation is on page 21 of your agenda, paragraph 2.1, and then the reasons for that follow on afterwards. Okay, so all those in favour of grant, please. 1, 2. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We will now move on. We will now move on to our next application, and that is agenda item 7, VOC 2022-1598. Thank you, Hugh. To vary conditions 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, and 19 of planning application 321-1556, full application, redevelopment of Wimble Market to continuing care community comprising of 67 age-restricted apartments, 26 age-restricted bungalows, 6 age-restricted chalet bungalows, 1 wellness centre, 9 open market houses, parking, highway improvements and a pedestrian link, description amended on the 24th of September 21 as agreed to include the dwelling numbers, to allow for amending the incorrect plans, including a phasing plan, rewording of the pre-commencement conditions to refer to phasing at Wimble Market, Station Terrace, Wimble Minster, and that's pages 59 to 86 on your agenda. And our presenting officer is Naomi Shinkins. Morning.
Jane, I couldn't use your charger cable because I'm getting to the flashy red light.
This way over.
Well, the officer starts on the next one. Thank you. No, it's just come up with the things. So look at next one. Naomi, okay.
Is it okay to proceed? Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members. This planning application, as mentioned by the chair, is the planning application for Wimble Market, which is to vary a number of conditions on the original planning permission. That's conditions 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, and 19. These variations will allow for the to amend incorrect plans on the original planning application. It will allow to include a phasing plan, which has been proposed, and it allows for the rewording of pre-occupation conditions to refer to the phasing plan that's being announced. So, in terms of an update, just to advise, there is an area in the description where it refers to the pre-commencement conditions. It should be amended and refer to pre-occupation conditions. So that is an error in the officer report description. Also to advise, there's been a revised phasing plan which has been submitted to clarify the construction phasing. And this is the same plan number as previously, but is revision P06, and the officer report and relevant conditions will need to be updated accordingly to refer to that revision rather than the original plan in the officer report. So in terms of location and context, this is the application site within the committee area, in the wider committee area. Again, it's the Whitmore market site within Whitmore itself. This slide shows the application site in relation to the town centre, where it's to the southeast. It's approximately a 15-minute walk from the town centre. So again, Whitmore market is located here, and the town centre, Whitmore Minster, is located here. And this slide shows the extent of the application site, which is again the market site, and we can see in the aerial image the market and car park structures that were previously on the site. These images show the existing views of Station Terrace and Grenville Road, which are roads surrounding the site, and you can see the location markers on the location plan on the slide. And these images show the existing views of the market from the, as you can see, the industrial estate and the view from my gardens. So the application site itself, again, it's the former market site. It's generally flat and extends to approximately 2 hectares. And these images show views from inside the site. Again, you can see the location markers on the slide for you. And in terms of further context, the application site is within the urban area of Whitmore and Coal Hill, and it is some 400 metres from the town centre boundary. It's also within the vicinity of the protected Dorset heathlands. It's between 400 metres and 5 kilometres of the Dorset heathlands. It's also adjacent to the St John's Hill Conservation Area. So in terms of site history, the full application was refused in July 2021, where a sufficient affordable housing contribution was not secured, nor was the appropriate heathfront mitigation, and sufficient drainage information was not provided. However, I'm sure members will remember a full application was given a resolution to grant in October 2021, which was subject to a legal agreement. This legal agreement was completed in January 2022, and permission was granted then. So as a reminder to members, this image gives an artist's impression of the development overall, an aerial view of the development, which shows the apartment block, bungalows and chalet bungalows located around this, open market houses to the north, and further bungalows and chalet bungalows also to the north. Again, a reminder of the street scenes that were approved at the committee in October 2021. And finally, just a summary of the development that was approved. So in terms of this proposal, this application is proposed to vary the conditions under Section 73 of the Planning Act. And these conditions, as I mentioned previously, the first one is Condition 2. The reason for varying Condition 2 is to amend the correct plans that were included in the original permission. It's also to include a phasing plan that's been proposed, and this phasing plan is for the construction and occupation of the development, which would need to be added to the approved drawing list. In terms of other conditions to be approved, in order to incorporate the phasing plan, there's a number of, in the original permission, there's a number of pre-occupation conditions. And these would need to be amended to include the phasing plan as part of the condition, so it can be occupied in those proposed phases. And as you can see, the text highlighted in bold is the text that would be added to the condition. Just to go back to the approved drawing list, the plans that were incorrect, one of them, the numbering was basically incorrect and was submitted correctly, but there was a typo in the officer report. And in terms of the other drawing, it refers to a bungalow when it should refer to a chalet bungalow. So just typos in the officer report. So in terms of condition 3, this is an access condition, and again, it will be amended as highlighted in bold, which is just adding the phasing plan and the correct provision PO6 included, which needs to be amended in the officer report. In terms of condition 4, again, similar amendment, and this is for the turning and parking condition. In terms of condition 6, this is for the biodiversity plan that's been secured, again, preoccupation and adding the phasing plan to the condition, again, the correct provision. Condition 9 is for the landscape implementation, and again, just adding the phasing plan to the beginning of the condition. Finally, condition 19, which is for the acoustic fence that needs to be installed on the southern boundary part of the occupation, and this does refer to phases 1 and 2, which I'll discuss in more detail later. So the application was advertised by site notice on the 22nd of April 2022, with site notices displayed on Grenville Road, Station Road, and at the entrance to the Riverside Industrial Estate. Additional notices were also erected in Lye Gardens and Daysport on the 6th of May 2022. No representations were received from neighbouring properties. In terms of consultee responses, the Town Council has responded to advise that preoccupation conditions were there for a reason. However, that planning officers are best placed to judge this, but believe that is still to be valid. In terms of other relevant consultees that may have an interest in the changes to conditions, the Conservation Officer has no objection, the Natural Environment Team had no objection, the Highways Team had no objection, and the Environmental Services Team had no objection. So in terms of the officer assessment, so to reiterate, the proposal is to amend preoccupation conditions only. However, I appreciate the proposed phasing is linked to how the development would be built. And I would like to point out to members that the construction management, including vehicular access and traffic routing, is controlled by condition 5 of the original permission, which is not under consideration today. So members are aware, traffic routing has not been traffic routing has not been submitted for me to discharge condition 5. However, I have been advised in the process of this application that the intention is to use the access from the Riverside Industrial Estate as far as possible for construction. So in terms of this, what the agent has advised is the initial construction will involve the laying out of all the estate roads and access points, as well as foundations for the entirety of the scheme. Therefore, in practice, these would all be part of phase 1. So that includes the foundations for phases 4 and 5, and the roads to be laid out within the development as a whole. The proposed phasing is more sequence of how the phases will be finished off. So phase 1 first, phase 2, phase 3, and so on. And the purpose of this application is to include the phasing in the preoccupation conditions that I've just set out in the presentation. So once the foundations go in and the construction phases on 1 to 3 are built simultaneously, and that's phase 3 up to first floor level as identified on the slide here, it's not practical or possible to drive through the site to phases 4 and 5, which will need to be accessed from Grenville Road to be finished off. So this comprises the construction of 9 open market houses, 7 bungalows, the wellness centre, and the apartment block from the above the first floor slab. It is not possible to complete block phase 3 at the end of the build programme because the offer to the incoming residents includes facilities that will be part of the apartment block. So when phase 1 and 2 and 3 are occupied, they will require use of facilities within the apartment block. So as advised, condition 5, the original planning permission, has yet to be discharged, but I have discussed this proposed strategy informally with the Dorset Council Highways team. They advised that the construction, traffic, routing and accesses are acceptable in principle, but this is subject to receiving a formal plan confirming these routes and access points and an updated construction management plan that includes this information. The Highways team had advised they would not accept construction traffic on Station Terrace, and once agreed, the discharge of the construction condition 5 would need to be again assessed by the Highways team, and that is controlled by the original commission. So moving on to planning issues, the principle of development, that's acceptable as it's been established under the original commission. The scale and design is acceptable because there are no changes. This is purely just to allow phasing of construction and occupation. Impact on the amenity is acceptable as there's no changes to the proposed design. Impact on landscape and heritage assets also acceptable. Again, no changes to the proposed design. No changes to economic benefits and no changes to the development access and parking. So the assessment of the changes to the conditions themselves. So condition 2, the revised plans. And again, if there was some previously incorrect plans, these will need to be amended. They're highlighted in bold in condition 2 of the officer report in your packs. And also it includes the addition of the phasing plan. So the nature of the condition does not change, and officers consider this to be acceptable. In terms of condition 3 and 4, this relates to highways and parking. Just as a reminder to members, the proposed access is the primary access will be from Grenville Road, and there's secondary access from Station Terrace to access this part of the development. And in terms of the parking provision, again, just a reminder of the parking provision that's been approved. None of this is changing. And in terms of the changes to the conditions, again, it's highlighted bold. Condition 3 refers to the access and the construction of that access. And it is just adding a phasing plan to the beginning of that condition. Condition 4 is in relation to returning the parking, and again, it's just adding the phasing plan to the beginning of that condition. Again, the Dorset Council Highways team have been consulted and they raised no objection to the proposed. In terms of biodiversity, which is condition 6, and this shows the Dorset Council Natural Environment team, their approved biodiversity mitigation enhancement plan. And that is obviously conditioned as a part of condition 6. The condition will be amended again as highlighted in bold. The changes to the condition only allow for development to be occupied in phases and doesn't materially change the approved condition or biodiversity plan. The natural environment team have been consulted and have raised no objection to this change. Condition 9, in terms of landscaping. So this shows the approved landscaping plan. Again, there's no changes to the proposed design. There is a condition requiring details of the landscaping to be submitted. There's no changes to that condition. The only change to be made is to the landscaping implementation condition. And again, allow it to be done in the occupation to be done in phases and the landscaping implementation to be done in phases. So it doesn't materially change the condition, and there is no objection to this proposal. In terms of condition 19, in reference to impact on amenity, condition 19 was required by the Environmental Health Officer. They require an acoustic fence to be located on the southern boundary. Apologies, north this way, in case that causes any confusion. This is the southern boundary, and it's for the future occupiers that are adjacent to the Riverside Industrial Estate. The proposal is to amend the acoustic fencing addition. The Environmental Health Officer has been consulted and they've raised no objection. It's subject to, apologies, that is wrong, sorry. The Environmental Officer is not dealing with landscaping, so they have no objection, subject to ensuring that the acoustic fence is installed prior to the occupation of both phases 1 and 2. the condition has been amended to ensure it is installed prior to the application of both phases 1 and 2. So in terms of other planning matters, flood risk, there are no changes to the approved design. Housing mix, there's no changes as well. Affordable housing, no changes to the housing contributions. Impacts on the character of the area, again, no changes to the design. Impact on heritage assets, again, no changes. No changes to open space, trees, servicing, Dorset heathlands, mitigation, contaminated land, or renewable energy. So in terms of conditions, they remain as per the previous application and commencement, condition 1, condition 2, the approved plans list, which will be amended as required, as I've just explained in my presentation. Conditions 3 and 4, again, amended as just presented. The condition 5, the construction method statement and construction environmental management plan will remain the same. The biodiversity plan is amended as presented to you today. Subject to materials will remain as previously approved. Conditions 8 and 9 are landscaping. It's condition 9 in terms of landscaping implementation that would be amended. Condition 10, construction hours remain the same. Drainage levels, drainage and levels remain the same. The energy statement and water efficiency conditions remain the same. Contaminated land conditions remain the same. Conditions 17 to 19 are for external plant and noise. Only condition 19 would be amended as presented, and the tree protection and age restriction conditions would also remain the same. So, by way of summary, the principle of development again is established under the original application. The proposed design, there's no change, so it's considered acceptable. The landscaping, again, no change, so acceptable. Impact of neighbouring community, no change, so acceptable. Both layout and parking arrangements, no change, so acceptable. And impact on biodiversity, again, no change. So in terms of recommendation, the officer of recommendation is to grant, subject to the completion of the legal agreement, which requires the new planning application, and so the variation of condition application to be included within the legal agreement to ensure all obligations are secured from the original planning commission. That should be the end of my presentation, but I'm struggling to scroll across. Sorry, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. We don't have any public speakers on this application, so I will go straight through to the member debating questions. Shane, you're my first speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could we go back to the slide that showed the phasing with the, that's the one. That was coming, thank you. Yeah, I've got a concern about it. They used a phrase, and I didn't write it down, that the developer told you that the access from the Riverside Industrial Estate, they would build out for as long as possible, or something like that. I can't remember the exact phrase that you used. As far as possible.
As far as possible.
Okay. Now, that doesn't give me enough assurance as a member in terms of phasing out this site and how this site is going to be built out. I've got a concern about the amount of construction traffic that will be using Grenville Road. So Grenville Road has never been an access onto this site for decades. It had gates there originally, but I am struggling to remember when that was actually used as an access onto that former market site. I'm pleased to hear that Station Terrace isn't going to be used for construction traffic, and the highways have acknowledged the fact that that is not acceptable route into this site for construction traffic. But it brings me back to the Riverside Industrial Estate, which presently is the access onto the market site. It's wide, and it was obviously laid out and built to accommodate that type of traffic as it being an industrial estate. So my concerns are still centred around the applicant saying, as far as possible, that they would build the site out using this phasing scheme. My my view is that the phasing scheme would start from the left-hand side, with 1 and 2 entering from Grenville Road, and the vast majority of construction traffic coming through from what is the industrial Riverside. I think at this point, Madam Chairman, I'll leave it for other members to make any comment on that. But as a local ward member, my knowledge on the site is quite extensive, and I'm not convinced that highways have really got their head around this. The last thing I would make on it is that in terms of the construction traffic, you have to use Lye Road and then turn into Grenville Road. Lye Road is one of the safe walking sites, as much as it is the St John's Infant School, and that Grenville Road and Lye Road junction has no pedestrian traffic light regulation that you get further down St John's Crossroads does. So I've got concerns about the construction traffic use in that junction. Yeah.
Very welcome to come back.
And just a couple of points on that. I appreciate the access through the industrial estate is itself, given it's an industrial estate, it's going to inconvenience residents next from the access point perspective, but there's obviously a residential road that the traffic would need to travel through. So I think in terms of construction and the nature of construction, residents, there will be an inconvenience to residents around the site, regardless. In terms of the practicality of splitting it, it then spreads the inconvenience rather than it being just in one area. And whether or not that's acceptable is, I'm not saying that whether that is acceptable or not. And in terms of safety matters, for Lye Road and the junction, etc., and a construction management plan has been submitted to discharge the condition, and they will have banksmen on site. Traffic will be controlled in and around the site, and there will be slots for deliveries. Basically, the requirements that are needed for a safe construction site. And that construction management plan currently requires more information, such as the traffic routing to be submitted and reviewed by the highways team. So that hasn't been discharged yet. But in terms of the highways safety requirements, the developer needs to meet the requirements for junctions such as that on Lye Road.
Do you want to come in?
If I may, please, Chairman, as well as the planning regulations, there are obviously other regulations that govern how development is undertaken, and the Health and Safety Executive have got guidance that developers have to adhere to, and there is also the Construction Design and Management Regulations 2015, and part of those regulations talk about traffic routes in development, and it says that a construction site must be organised in such a way that, so far as is reasonably practical, pedestrians and vehicles can move without risks to health or safety. It says traffic routes must be suitable for the persons or vehicles using them, sufficient in number and in suitable positions and of sufficient size. If the traffic route doesn't satisfy the provisions, the developer has to take suitable steps to ensure that, and I'm paraphrasing this, it's too much of it to be to quote directly, that pedestrians and vehicles may use it without causing danger to health or safety to those people, and that there's sufficient space between vehicles and pedestrians to ensure that safety. It then goes on to talk about each traffic route must be indicated by suitable signs, regularly checked, properly maintained, and no vehicle is to be driven on a traffic route unless, as far as is reasonably practical, that traffic route is free from obstruction and permits sufficient clearance. So there are layers of regulation that are designed to assist the process in ensuring that development is managed properly. And in a situation like this, where you're in an urban environment, then clearly those regulations are there to ensure, as Naomi's just mentioned, the use of banksmen and other things to try and prevent these conflicts from taking place. Swept path analysis, all sorts of things that will demonstrate that the road is of sufficient size and has the capacity to accommodate the traffic. And we defer to our colleagues in highways to scrutinise those construction management plans when they're put before us to ensure that the road has the capability and the management arrangements are in place to manage that construction traffic as and when. I hope that assists members to just understand some of the other regulations that are in place that discuss through the process. Thank you.
You want to come back?
Please, Madam Chairman. I think as I understand it, the traffic management plan is yet to be submitted.
The briefing is yet to be formally submitted, yes.
With your permission, Madam Chairman, I'll come back later in the day, but as I've spoken at length, let my other colleagues speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Not a local member, but a local resident. Yeah, access to the market from Grenville Road hasn't been since the 90s, I think, mid-90s. So, yeah, it's quite a time ago. There are regulations, we've heard of those. Thank you very much, Kim. Very interesting. Loads of them. There's also loopholes. And this is not tight enough. And Shane said this is allowing them. I mean, they've got there's awkward access for this site, whichever way you look at it. Okay. If you're on the industrial estate, the access is absolutely brilliant. But again, getting to that industrial estate, it's a very convoluted route. And it's often a one-way street. So that's, and I believe there's parking, yeah, quite a bit of parking. Come down Avenue Road and Station Road. So, yeah, but once you're on the industrial estate, it's really good. It's quite wide and the access is really good. Grenville Road's another matter. And we all know about the log jams in Line Road generally. That is adjacent to one of the probably almost the narrowest part of Line Road, with the pedestrian pavement. Not exactly expensive. There's often hold-ups there, and it's close to the entrance. There is close to a set of traffic lights, so the traffic backs up. Definitely coming from the east. Quite a lot during the day, not just rush hour, quite a lot of the time in the day. But I still think the temptation will be, of the two, probably Grenville Road is the easiest access to take. You know, if I were coming in from the outside, it would be the easiest access. So I really think we could be looking at trying to tie up on that condition. They use that solely for 1, 2, and 3. I understand they can't do it for 4 and 5 because there wouldn't be any access. But is there any way, I'm sorry, Chairman, I'm struggling, but is there any way we can say, well, can that condition be changed to say the wording strengthened? What I'm saying. Follow what I'm saying there.
Yes, I do. My understanding of the construction process, and as I tried to highlight in the slides, phases 1, 2, and phases 3 to that first floor slab would be built using the construction access of the Riverside Industrial Estate. Then from Grenville Road, first floor slab above phase 3 would need to be from Grenville Road. My assumption being that the access to the industrial estate would be blocked off by the bungalow that would be built in front of that access, which would be in line with the first floor slab being completed of the apartment block. So without further knowledge of the construction process, that could be, I'm not sure if that's possible.
Okay, now I understand the development logistics of this, yeah. Sorry, come back, Chairman. But I'm still not convinced that highways have given us enough thorough examination. I am concerned about the Grenville Road, Line Road junction and the traffic within Grenville Road. There are a couple of other developments locally where we have had issues about construction traffic access. I won't mention them, but I think very recent developments. I'm not really happy that highways are given this full measure. I don't leave it here.
I think I'm picking up from members that there is still a lot of concern about the construction management plan. And I'm going to suggest from the chair that we actually defer this item so that more work is done on that management plan and we bring it back rather than debate it further this morning, because I don't think it's going to get us anywhere. And I think we'll still end up possibly moving a deferral. Jane, did you want to second that?
Madam Chairman, if I may make comment as well, please. Yeah, I'm happy to second that. And I think from my point of view, if it would give officers here is that I'm not content that the Riverside access is being used to build up to first floor on 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 5. And then once they get to that, then we're not sure what's going to happen to that, where the construction traffic's going to come through. I think the phasing's wrong on it, but certainly presently 2, 1, 2 and 3 needs to be full build out from that Riverside industrial estate access, and the Grenville Road access is 4 and 5 for their build out. And I think I can't stress enough, I think that construction traffic using Live Road, and as Councillor Cook says, this is a difficult site in an urban environment, so access onto it is always going to be problematic. But as I said, it is a safe route into St John's School on Live Road, which is, as Councillor Cook says, in places it's quite a narrow road. There is a pedestrian crossing on St John's Crossroads that's used to get into the school, but there is no crossing junction of Live Road, Grenville Road. That's one of my concerns, the sheer volume of traffic that could be using that. And there's a lot of children that walk into that school. It's quite a big infant school. But aside from that, Madam Chairman, yes, I'm happy to second your proposal from the Chair. Thank you.
Alex, you indicated you wanted to speak. Do you still wish to say something?
Yes, but you'll say it's irrelevant. Can I first of all ask, because this was accepted, I can't remember, March, wasn't it? It doesn't fall under the new housing regulations. It will, because it's come back today.
Because construction hasn't started yet.
Thank you. My point is, looking at this now, and bearing in mind what has been happening in the last few weeks, we have P3, and well, the whole site is aimed at older people, pretty much, and therefore we have things like ambulances turning up regularly. I think the whole access to this, I mean, I know the policy is not to have, through routes to create a rat run, but I am concerned that access to this site could be blocked quite easily in case of an accident on Lee Road, in case of an ambulance pulling in. There's not a lot of escape routes out of this site. I mean, if there was a catastrophic fire, and they do happen on construction sites, it's going to be hard work getting out. And I just wonder if it would be possible to keep the Riverside Industrial Estate access open even after build out, though that I know that changes the build.
Planning permission has already been granted as is. And it's not before us today. And it is not a material to consideration as to the items that we're discussing about the construction management. So we can't go and reinvent. David.
I'm just looking at this now. I don't know the site. I know we're more than it. I don't know this particularly. The issue seems to be, as I understand it, with building phases 4 and 5. Once they've got foundations in, then they'll be building phases 4 and 5 using construction access from Grenville Road. First of all, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the dirtiest part of the development, so the substructure, foundations, road layouts, etc., which is the most destructive part of construction, would be carried out as part of phase 1. And then the above ground level for phases 4 and 5 would be from Grenville Road at a later stage.
Thanks. And it seems to be coming from those members who know the area far better than I do, is that access from Grenville Road is very difficult. Again, can I just come in? That's part of the issue.
it is a,
Interesting. Swinburne. Construction traffic next.
If it's not the weather, it's noise interference.
I was saying in a particular cruising by the agent. So in terms of from Grenville Road, that would be Route 2, and it is from Live Road and then left-hand turn onto Grenville Road. Grenville Road itself is a state road. About 200 meters long. I'm correct, my measurement's correct. Do you want to see a picture of Grenville Road? It was in my presentation.
I sort of know Grenville Road a little bit because I know Lye Road because I used to take my kids to the rugby club, which is just off from Lye Road, and I used to, but it still is. Yeah, no, that's fine. My concern was if access, the construction traffic is easier from the industrial entrance, is the phasing perhaps the wrong way around? So that what they've got as phases 4 and 5 could actually be built out first, and you sort of move across the site backwards so that you effectively you're not painting yourself into any corners. You're moving from phase 4, phase 5, phase 3, phase 2, phase 1. Phase 1, phase 2 doesn't really matter. But you've got all of the access that can then come through that industrial access. So it seems to me that the phasing itself would be correct to make this issue of access a little bit better. That's simply my thoughts. Said about access. I'd also like to know what sort of timescale we're talking about between phases, how long till the project is likely to take.
Just to point out, while the industrial, I think as I mentioned previously, while the industrial estate access is better as it's in an industrial estate, and as well, I think access to the site requires routes through residential areas, and they are narrow residential areas, so it is with Lordans and development. So each access will have its own issues. But I appreciate those concerns raised, particularly about the Grenville Road access. So the industrial estate access isn't perfect, but I can see the point in terms of to making. Should I answer the question regarding timescales? So in terms of indicative timescales, the agent has advised that if development is to start in the near future, we will be looking at the industrial estate access until sort of mid 2023, because they have all the substructure work to do, which is obviously a time-consuming process and probably the slowest part of the construction phase. After that, I think they're looking at using the Grenville Road access for possibly another 12 months after that. Again, these are indicative timescales, and it depends on what happens in terms of the construction process.
Okay. You can tell me that response, David.
I think so, yeah. I understand the response. I think it's probably best to leave it to people on the other side, but no access is going to be perfect. I get that. And it's just trying to weigh up which is the better access, perhaps for more permanent use. I'll leave that to the people who know really more better than I do.
I think we've all agreed that there is concern over the phasing plan and the difficulties with both of the access points, but we are not experts. And I think we should wait to see the development plan come in. Unless anyone has any new points, I don't want to go over old ground again. If you have a new point, otherwise I will move to the vote.
Chairman. Councillor Cook was right in terms of the phasing of 4 and 5 with back from Grenville Road and
I said New Point.
yeah, 1, 2, 3 from the Riverside. Ms. Jenkins, could you put up the slide you had that showed the route that developers have put in with the blue and the red arrows that you had on that, please? I concur with my colleague, Councillor Cook, that it's disappointing highways haven't had a closer look at this. And as I understand it, this is from the developers. Yeah. So this is a total lack of understanding of the developers on the geography and the road routes within Wimborne, because the red route is not it's not really a sustainable route into that site to use Newborough and get onto the site from that side. What you should do is use Lye Road. While we don't want additional traffic on Lye Road, unfortunately, as we know, because it's an urban environment, and to get onto the site is going to be problematic anyway, but you would use Lye Road and Avenue Road because that's a traffic light to the junction. And when that brings you down to the part of Newborough that goes into Station Road at that point, it would have a very limited impact on any residential development at that particular point. You know, so
Shane, I'm going to stop you there. I asked for New Points.
it is a new point.
It is still about the difficulties with the access. It is not a new point.
The developers.
I'm going to bring Kim in. She wants to make some comments about where we are.
Thank you, members. So as far as I understand it, we moved, well, we voted on deferral to request that officers go back to the developer to request more work on the construction management plan required, and that should come back with more details about the phasing and the routes for the construction management plan, with the potential for securing more of the build from the industrial estate access, with only the latter phases from Grenville Road to limit the amount of development that uses Grenville Road. Is that correct? Thank you.
That's correct, and the red route isn't feasible.
Had to get that last one in. David.
Yeah, I still think that the phasing itself is in the reverse order. If you're going to make best use of.
We have already been through that, and we have agreed that in the recommendation to defer, that is one of the aspects that will be discussed as part of the construction management plan, which has not yet been submitted. It is not for us to redesign what the phasing is to be. So do you have anything else that you wish to say on this application? Okay. We have a proposal to defer, which has been seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please, on those in support of deferral on these issues? Again, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Okay, agenda item number, so that item is deferred.
Okay.
The next officers are making their way over. And,
So
so
the next one.
we'll take a 3-minute comfort break, people, please.
You know, to compensate them.
I didn't get to.
It's okay.
HMI on. H.
It's that red route.
You're avoiding.
It's with the parking on Newborough, it's narrow, isn't it? No.
Yeah, big mix.
Decided to do the complete destruction of the land.
Yeah.
Oh, that was in the original planning.
Yes.
Ringwood Road next.
Should they? But there was that construction plan. Yeah, now people realise that.
You see, their wording is so clever.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can't argue that, can you? If they're not feeling it.
Ringwood Road Fern down, is that it?
So.
You see that, the plans, that village burnt out yesterday. Wellington. It's not Wellington, but Wellington or something. And I read
Yeah.
16 houses
Yeah.
in one go.
They showed up the news.
They're too close together.
Showed up the news this morning, and it was weird the way that some of it wasn't touched and on each end were.
Well, it's
obviously where the
Where the wind's going, yes. And what's available to burn? If you've got a lot of dry grass and if your buildings are very.
Yeah.
covered.
Aerosol was intact, wasn't it? It was semis on each end. Yeah. Most of the day.
I mean, I know we don't want people boy races making, but why does it have to be a sort of, everything has to be a dead end? How do you escape out of that? If you've got a breakdown on Lye Road. Fire engine, these days, ambulances, there ought to be provision. A big lorry to pass an ambulance.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
at least a few
And
places
the
along.
industrial estate route would have made.
Yeah, and
But
if you'd
Chase
left,
Terrace.
but if you'd left the industrial, you know, as a secondary exit, I mean, what's the worst of that? They go in, they've still got to go a hell of a convoluted route. They'd be able to drive from Riverside Terrace to Granby. There ought to be an alternative access to
Yeah.
everywhere these days. You know, we can see what happens. You know, just on Lye Road.
We told them that.
I know. Just annoys me because, you know, then you could divert them to Riverside and out onto that road, the big road. And we're doing it again and again and again. You know, we're crushing things in. I mean, this one.
It was just, they got to make maximum use of
They've
the
got
land,
it
didn't
now,
they?
yeah. But this one bit where, generally speaking, it's fine. And you you're 2 meters from the wooden fence. And most of the time, you just go, geez, can't they space it out a bit?
Depends if I haven't got much of a problem with this one.
In principle, I happen to do just look at a few bits where I just go,
There is a bit of an issue about this one about visitor parking, isn't there?
I mean,
Two per property.
nothing to do.
That's it.
And a couple of visitor car park. But there doesn't appear to be any, say, informal parking to park on in an emergency. That's all doing. It doesn't have to be tarmac death. Could go off the road if they just crash something. The loading and unloading line. It's that business. There were, how many were there? 12. I can't remember what the original lot was. So they're putting in 12, probably to replace 4.
Apartment block, it's 6, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's a lot. I did the sort of good one, like, you know, what's it called? Google map, and you go, yeah, that's all right. And then you think, oh, where she's from, if she's even written it. Oh God, oh, you're scaffolding, yes. What's going on out there?
It's a big day.
The black guy.
Oh, it's sort of the meeting, so. Yeah.
Are we still on a break? Are we?
No. Where is David?
He's disappeared.
Sorry for the hold up. I've been waiting for our committee clerk to come back.
I was going to say.
Good.
You don't get slapped.
Okay, thank you for your patience, everybody. We should now move on to agenda item 8. That is 3211471 full application to demolish the existing flats and dwelling and erect 12 three-bedroom houses arranged as 6 pairs of semi-detached properties together with associated parking and access at 442 Ringwood Road, Ferndown. And Naomi is going to take us through this presentation as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members, again. Yes, so this application is an application for 442 Ringwood Road, which comprises the demolition of the existing flats and dwellings and to erect 12 three-bedroom houses arranged.
Give him the death stare, go on.
To apologise if we're going to have to close all the windows on that side because of the noise. Please, anyone, if we are starting to get too hot and sweaty, please indicate straight away and we'll open them up and
Wave your arms about to get some air.
It's going to be a little while. Please bear with us. Yeah, the noise from that direction seems to have stopped. So if we open the back doors again, please. Motion. Okay, thank you, Naomi.
I'll continue. The application must be brought to committee under the scheme of delegation process as requested by the committee chair and head of service. Please note the following presentation is approximately 34 slides, which are numbered at the top. So please refer to the numbers if you require particular slides after my presentation. So by way of updates, just to advise, the numbering in the conditions in the officer report is incorrect. Condition 20 to be condition 13 and so on for subsequent conditions. Also to note, the agent has advised if members are unable to accept the reduced commencement period of 18 months as set out in condition 1 of the officer report, the applicant is willing to enter into a section 106 agreement to secure the viability review clause. Also to note that a representation was received after the officer report was written, and that was from the residents of 440 Ringwood Road, advising that the parking and turning on their drive should not be tolerated by residents as there is an active metro set. So in terms of the location and context, this shows the location of the site in Ferndown, again on Ringwood Road, which is to the east of Winmore. As we can see from the aerial view of the site showing Ringwood Road, located here. This is a busy A road, and we can see it's a surrounding built-up residential area. So this slide shows the extent of the application site, which comprises the dwelling located here and a block of flats located here. There's a large hard standing area for parking in front of the flats and dwelling, and as you can see from the aerial view that the boundaries are well vegetated, particularly to Ringwood Road, which adds to the character of the area. So in terms still of location and context, as we can see images from around the site, the first two being up and down Ringwood Road, again the dense vegetation along Ringwood Road adds to the character of the area, and then this is the third image is the view of Prince Drive from the back of the development. The application site itself, again, this shows the extent of the application site, again, the dwelling and the flats. These images show the views within the site. We can see dwelling and the block flats together. This is the flats in by themselves where the dwelling is located to this side. And then this is the rear gardens of the block of flats. So in terms of the site history, so a full application for 27 retirement living flats was refused in June 2020. It was refused based on the impact of character of the area, the impact on neighbouring amenity, particularly the residents of the town and Greenwich Drive, impact on future occupiers, particularly to the north here, given protected trees on the site, and impact on these protected trees as well. So the proposed development itself, the table provides a summary of the development, which is also in the officer report. The site itself is 0.4 hectares. The current use is C3 residential. Proposed use will also be C3 residential. Proposed dwellings, each semi-detached pair is 10 metres in width, and they are 10.5 metres in length. 12 units, again, 6 semi-detached pairs. The height to the ridge is approximately 7.8 metres and 4.8 metres to the eaves. Materials range from brick render, slate vest, and PVC. 24 parking spaces will be provided, flooding to 2 stories in height, and the distance to neighbouring boundaries are noted on the table, and we'll discuss those in more detail later. Again, the proposed development is to demolish the existing flats and dwelling and erect 12 three-bedroom houses arranged in 6 pairs of semi-detached properties, together with the associated parking and access. So all house types, again, are semi-detached, and there's 3 variations. This one shows units 1 and 2 located on the site. Similar to the other units on the site, however, there is a difference in detailing, such as materials and the porch. This units 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, and 12, again identified on the plan. There is a variation in materials, but also variation in the layout, particularly at, to the rear property, to avoid any overlooking issues that would be caused by bedrooms to the side of this, windows to the side of this bedroom. And this is units 7 to 10, which are similar to units 1 and 2, but again, there's some difference in materials and the some of the detailing. This shows the street scene both with and without trees, the top of the trees and without the trees, so that we can have a better idea of the context. We can see St. George's Court to the north, and then 440 Ringwood Road to the south. This is an aerial view of the proposed development. Again, St. George's Court to the north and 440 Ringwood Road to the south. So in terms of local representations, 7 members of the public have submitted representations, 1 letter of support and 6 raising concerns or objecting to the proposal on the following grounds. The letters of support refer to it being an appropriate design and that they generally support the scheme. And the concerns raised include damage to neighbouring properties by existing trees to be retained, the drainage concerns that drainage ditches need to be retained, flood risk concerns that it would increase flood risk to neighbouring properties, and then the concern raised that the retained footpath through the site would now have a more intensified use and would risk impact on the neighbouring community. So in terms of local consultation responses, the Ferndale Town Council have responded. They consider 12 homes to be overdevelopment of the site. They have concerns regarding the access and service vehicles, such as refuse collection. And they also raised concerns regarding lack of new planting and the biodiversity concerns raised by the East Dorset Farming Department. So in terms of other consultees, Natural England have raised no objection. The Highways team, no objection subject to condition. The tree team, no objection subject to condition. Landscape team did raise an objection due to urban design and tree concerns, which I will discuss later. The tree officer has raised, raised no objection subject to condition and don't share the landscape concerns. The urban design officer, again, no objection and they don't share the concerns raised by the landscape officer. The housing officer has raised an objection due to the lack of affordable housing. Just to note, this has been overcome with viability information, which I will discuss later. The natural environment team, Dorset Council natural environment team endorsed biodiversity plan has been submitted, so has been agreed with the natural environment team. The Dorset Waste Services accept that collection is possible, and the Lead Flow Authority have raised no objection subject to condition. Worcester Water have no objection, and the Environment Agency haven't responded. So, in terms of the principle of development, so the planning application proposes the erection of new dwellings within the development limits of the main urban area further down West Carley. This is where the piece of development is in accordance with the local and national planning policies. Again, the application site is currently residential and it is surrounded by residential development also. So in terms of viability, the submitted viability appraisal states that the proposal cannot support any affordable housing or other financial contributions apart from SIL. Apologies, I should note that the first point should refer to the local planning policy require up to 40%. It's a brownfield site, so it's 40%. That's a typo in the presentation. The Dorset Council housing officer raised an objection to the lack of affordable housing provision that notes the proposed should be compliant. In line with local planning policy, again, the proposed should provide up to 40% affordable housing, so the viability information has been submitted to show this is not possible. The submitted viability information has been assessed by the District Valuation Service, and that's the DVS. The DVS is a specialist property arm of the Valuation Office Agency. They provide independent, impartial valuation and professional property advice across the entire public sector and where public money or public functions are involved. So the applicant in their viability information submitted advised that a major factor in the site's overall economic viability is the demonstrable existing use value of the site, and combined with the SIL charges, the project is unable to support any affordable housing contribution. So in relation to the existing use value of the site, paragraph 15 of the planning policy guidance refers to existing use value as the first component of calculating benchmark land value, and the existing use value is the value of land in its existing use. Again, this is a residential site and it's the existing use. The applicant's figure in respect of the existing use value is just over 1.6 million, and the DVS assessed the existing use value on the basis of publicly information and data available. Also considering indexation, evidence of recent sales and similar property in the locality, the DVS has come to the conclusion of a similar existing use value of 1.6 million. The case officer has scrutinised the existing use value and the research the DVS has gone through to establish this, and this has been done in consultation with other senior officers within development management. The SIL calculations that were provided by the council SIL officer, that is 33,487. So based on the existing use value, the benchmark land value is 1.84 million. This provides us the existing use value plus a premium of 15%, which is set out in planning practice guidance. The resulting residual land value for the scheme is below the DVS's adopted benchmark land value, and this indicates that the scheme is not actually viable, and a policy compliance scheme is not viable. The case officer has scrutinised the work carried out by the DVS to establish the above existing use value, the gross development value, and the build costs, which all lead to the calculations presented to you on the screen. The residual land value is based on these calculations. It is therefore accepted that it is not viable to provide an affordable housing contribution, and the proposed lack of affordable housing provision does not therefore does not form a reason for refusal. However, it is noted that the DV advised that a review clause might be appropriate if permission is to be granted. Our own affordable housing SPD does note that where financial viability evidence concludes that it is not possible to meet the relevant affordable housing targets required for the planning policy, the associated Section 106 agreement may include provisions for viability and affordable housing review if the development has commenced or reached a specific stage within a specific time period. That time period is not specified, nor did the district valuer suggest a trigger for that time period. So at the time of writing the report, the applicant was prepared to accept a reduced commencement timeframe period from the standard 3 years conditions down to 18 months for commencement. The reduced timeframe for commencement would provide certainty that the applicant would build out the permission in a timely manner and the viability review would not be required. However, as advised in the update to the applicant, the applicant is willing to enter into Section 106 agreements to secure a viability review if required, but the commencement period would return to the standard 3-year period. So in terms of design and landscaping, dwellings provided, again, 6 pairs of semi-detached 3-bedroom dwellings. Each dwelling has its own private garden and 2 parking spaces. Cycling bin storage is located to the rear of each dwelling. Vehicular pedestrian access is via the existing access on the Ringwood Road. The existing footway through the site is retained, as you can see here, along the boundary, which continues on to Ringwood Drive and Ringwood Road at this end. The proposed dwellings are 18 to 22.5 metres from Ringwood Road, and the existing trees within the site are retained as far as possible. The dwellings are 2-storey in height, and as we saw previously, are traditional in design. All dwellings are similar in design, but again with some variations to the fenestration and materials. And again, as we can see here, the site is well screened by the existing vegetation. As noted previously, the design concerns have been raised by the landscape officer. However, both urban design and tree officers do not share the concerns that were raised. They did ask for some minor tweaks to the layout, and a revised design was submitted in March. Some of the tweaks were changing this boundary to a brick wall rather than closed board fencing, and some realignment of these units here to improve parking and increase the potential for landscape within the site. In terms of it's the case officer's opinion that the revised layout is considered acceptable in both urban design and landscape terms and meets the design criteria for the special character area. The proposed development is considered to be an efficient use of the land in the context of the special character area and the site constraint, which has a number of protected trees. While rear gardens fronting the public highway is not a typical characteristic in this area, it is not unacceptable. And again, the proposed dwellings are 18 to 22.5 metres from the boundary, and existing trees and screening to Ringwood Road is retained. Proposed dwellings themselves are considered in keeping with the special character area. Proposed landscaping is considered to be generally acceptable. There are some third-party concerns regarding non-native species, but the details of the landscaping have been conditioned to ensure that the proposed species are acceptable, and in general, the design is considered acceptable. So in terms of the impact on neighbouring amenity, the proposed separation distances to the neighbouring dwellings are as identified on the slide above on the screen. The dwellings are 2 stories in height with eaves and ridge heights of 4.8 to the eaves, 7.8 to the bridge. Again, unit types, the additional unit type with variation in the layout to avoid overlooking of neighbouring properties resolves any potential overlooking in this part of the site. And in general, the proposed development is considered acceptable where it's not anticipated it would result in a negative impact on neighbouring. In terms of highways and parking, again, the existing access will be used from Ringwood Road. There's 2 parking spaces per dwelling, which has been provided. This is in line with the Dorset Council parking guidance for individual 3-bedroom dwellings. However, it is noted for over 5 dwellings, visitor parking would be, the guidance suggests that it is to be provided. And the development of this type would require 3 visitor parking spaces. Given that 2 parking spaces per dwelling are provided and the ability for some on-street parking, and the proposed parking is considered acceptable. Again, the cycle parking is provided within rear gardens, and the highways officers have been consulted and have raised no objection to the proposed. In terms of trees, so extensive tree advice has been provided throughout the application, but also at pre-application stage, and given the substantial number of trees within the site. And this has all been done in consultation with the tree officer, who has raised no objections subject to condition. And the majority of trees are retained at the site. There's some minor trees within the site which would be removed, but they're not of significance, and that is agreed with the tree officer. So in terms of biodiversity and the So in terms of biodiversity, the site is within 5k of the protected heathlands, and the proposal is for a net increase of 3 residential units. So the existing is 1 house and 8 flats, which obviously will be demolished and replaced by 12 houses. So in combination with other plans and projects, and in the absence and avoidance of mitigation measures, it is likely to have a significant effect on the sites, and is therefore necessary to undertake an appropriate assessment. So an appropriate assessment has been carried out, and it has concluded that the mitigation measures set out in the Dorset Heathlands SPD can prevent adverse impacts on the integrity of protected sites. This is in the form of the community infrastructure levy payments that will be made, and that is all in accordance with the Dorset Heathlands SPD. In terms of biodiversity, again, the Dorset Council Natural Environment Team have improved the biodiversity mitigation enhancement plan, as shown on the screen. Mitigation includes and enhancement includes habitat piles, bat boxes, bee boxes, bird boxes, bike track corridors, native tree planting, and just referring back to the comments from the neighbours at 440 River Road, the badger set has been considered within the biodiversity enhancement plan, and badger corridors have been provided, and the natural environment team are satisfied with those. In terms of drainage, the drainage will be provided within the centre of the site, so each of the houses will drain to the subway area within the development. The Dorset Council Lead Fund Authority have been consulted and noted that based on the conceptual drainage strategy, that they have no objection subject to the line being provided, and those conditions have been imposed. The proposed drainage strategy for foul water will utilise existing foul water connections on the site. So obviously there's residential development there, they will use the existing foul water connections, and Wessex Water have raised no objection to this proposal. So in terms of waste, the Dorset Waste Services have been consulted on the proposed, and in terms of waste collection, where there will be curbside waste collection within the development. They have noted that the layout looks tight, but accept that the tracking information shows that collection is possible, and haven't placed an objection. So coming towards the end of the presentation, in terms of conditions, the first condition is commencement. This currently set out in the officer report is reduced to 18 months if the viability review is not required. Condition 2 is the approved plans listed. Conditions 3 and 4 are the highways requirements, so access, turning and parking. Condition 5 is the construction method statement. Condition 6, the biodiversity plan to be secured. 7 is tangible soil materials. 8 and 9 are landscaping conditions and their implementation. Condition 10 is construction hours. 11 to 12 drainage. 13 and 14 the required energy statement, water efficiency, and 16 is tree protection. So just to note, in terms of the objection received from Ferndown Town Council, in terms of 12 months being overdevelopment of the site, Again, the case officer, I feel the design is acceptable and an efficient use of the land. There's no objections from the urban design officer, and actually the landscape officer concern raised by the landscape officer included that it was an inefficient use of the site. Access to service, concern raised regarding access to service vehicles. The vehicle tracking movements have been provided. Dorset Waste Services have advised that it is acceptable. In terms of the landscaping and biodiversity, in terms of the landscaping conditions have been imposed for the non-native species, or to ensure that native species will be provided. And the Dorset National Environment Mitigation Plan has been submitted. So in summary, the principle of development is considered acceptable. The design of the proposed is considered acceptable. Proposed landscaping acceptable. Impact on neighbouring community acceptable. Drainage acceptable, subject to condition. Impact on biodiversity acceptable, and impact on trees.
We've gone back somehow.
Apologies, that was the description. The description is incorrect. And that is the conclusion of the presentation.
Thank you. I think it's something we're all guilty of, cutting and pasting. Okay. To now move on to the public representations. We were due to have a member of the public to come and speak in support of the application. However, we've been informed that she's suffering from COVID this morning and is not able to be here. We have received a written representation on her behalf. However, it has not come directly from the resident and we are unable to verify her identity. So therefore, I'm not accepting it this morning. Okay, if members do wish to see it, it is available after the meeting. So my next speaker is the agent for the application, Giles Moore.
Thank you. Madam Chairman and committee members, on behalf of the applicants, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. The applicants are pleased to see that officers have recommended the application for approval, and this reflects a positive and open dialogue from the case officer during the course of the application. The applicants were keen from the outset to work with the council to arrive at a scheme that would deliver a well-designed family housing in a sustainable location. The applicants submitted a request for pre-application advice before making their formal submission. The pre-application advice response was positive, and this formal application builds on the advice received at the pre-application stage. When the applicants started to review the opportunities and constraints of the site, they revisited the appeal scheme, which was for 27 flats, and this was dismissed by the inspector. They also reviewed the comments of the local residents in relation to the then proposed flatted scheme. The inspector identified that the site has a verdant and spacious setting, and that the then proposed apartment block would result in the removal of a significant number of trees and being at 4 stories in height, be unduly prominent and at odds with the character of the area. The proposal before you today retains a mature tree coverage along the site boundaries, including the frontage, and ensures that the verdant nature of the character is maintained. We will see from the officer's report that the proposal is supported by the council's arboricultural officer. The limited views into the site from the entrance will be framed by the retained tree screen with limited glimpses of the proposed 2-storey built form. The applicant's approach to developing the site has moved away from that of the appeal scheme. There's been a departure from the large-scale apartment block to that of the 6 pairs of semi-detached properties you've seen in the slides in the presentation. This approach has allowed for greater spacing between the area built form and the provision of private garden spaces for each of the properties. The scale of the proposal has been reduced from the 4 stories proposed as the appeal scheme to 2-storey traditional design. This is reflective of the new road special character area. The layout of the proposed semi-detached properties has allowed for well-planned separation distances to neighbouring dwellings and allows the provision of private gardens. And as you've seen from the slides, the separation distances are to the southeast 16.5 metres and 12 metres to the north. 2 parking spaces are provided for each of the properties, and your highways officers confirmed their agreement to the proposed road layout and access design. If, as we hope, you're able to support and approve the application, the applicants are looking to make an immediate start, which will see the delivery of 12 much needed, well-designed family houses. The applicants are happy to agree to reduce implementation time of 18 months as opposed to the standard 3 years to demonstrate their commitment to delivering the proposal. Equally, if councillors yourselves require further certainty regarding the timeframe for delivery, the applicants will be willing to enter a Section 106 agreement to secure a review mechanism in relation to the scheme's viability. However, with the reduced offer of 18-month implementation period, we hope that the Section 106 isn't required. In terms of the late objection which came in with regard to 440 Ringwood Road, you'll see from the slide in front of you that there's no reliance or requirement to use any adjoining driveways for turning, or turning is provided within a proposed layout. The applicants would ask you to support the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Very much, Cheryl. Is there anything you wish to respond to what you heard? Okay, so I shall move on to the member debate. Jane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Ms Jenkins, for your presentation. I don't really have a great many questions. I got a couple of comments to make, which I'll make later on, but in terms of questions, it surrounds the 3 years as opposed to the 18 months period for looking at the viability. Going back after after a 3 year period to go back and look at that viability. If they do the 18 months, then we don't need to test that viability.
So in terms of reducing the commencement to 18 months ensures that the development is delivered within that time period, which then reduces the need for a viability review. The viability review will be required because a significant amount of time has passed, and obviously bill costs and property prices would vary. So the applicant's preferred approach for writing the report was to reduce the commencement time rather than going through the process of securing the legal agreement. The reason being there is no legal agreement required for the site, so it would be a legal agreement specifically requiring viability review, and the time and effort involved in that being what to take the approach of an 18-month commencement period.
Would we be in a position where we could actually put a clause in to say that after 50% build out of the site we could look at a viability, or would it be a preferred option just to stick to the 3 years and do a viability assessment through the legal agreement then? I'm quite keen that we do a viability assessment on a site.
The applicant is willing to enter into Section 106 to secure a viability review, and the viability review would be time-based given the size of the age. If it was 12 units, we would probably do it time-based. Normally, and the previous applications given to the committee, that the process is delegated to the legal team and officers to raise on the other 6 billion.
And that, I think that's out in my preferred option. Do that. Okay, I'll give way to all the members, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, could you just put up slide 25 again, please? Yeah, I was just slightly concerned about the distance from the property at the bottom, where it's 2.5 metres to the view that it backs onto or it's side onto. Are there any windows in that side of the property overlooking the existing property?
So at the first floor level, there's a bathroom window in 440 Ringwood Road, and there is a high-level lounge window, which is 1.7, which is floor height, I would expect. And so it's a high-level window. The principal window for the lounge is to the front elevation of 440 Ringwood Road. So that window is a secondary window at a high level. There are no windows at first floor level for the proposed development. The roof is pitted. So we would anticipate an issue with loss of light, but also again, that window to 440 Greenwood Road on the side is a secondary window. The light is coming from the principal window at the front.
David,
Could you put slide 20? I'm concerned about the idea that the viability assessment says that they can't build any affordable housing. First concern is, should it be absolutely possible to redesign what they're doing so that it would be viable? Which should mean that our remedy would be to say, refuse this application, come back with one that does fit with policy and allows you to do affordable housing. I'd just like to go through some of these numbers as well. So the gross development value is 4.8 million. Still two different figures there. First of all, as far as I'm assuming, if you put affordable housing in, that would reduce the SIL contribution anyway. It's target is 17.5%, which equals about 840,000. 843,500 as a profit target in cash terms. I don't understand where the other figures change the requirement or change that profit margin, and why the viability is not viable. It's a string of numbers with no real explanation as to what they are. So I'd like to understand that as well, please.
So in terms of the SIL contribution, why there's two different numbers, the applicant students had done their own SIL calculation, which they thought was 34,493. I asked the SIL officer to do a calculation for me, given there's existing development side, and the SIL number they came back to me with was 33,487. So that's what I confirmed to the DBS.
Sorry, I get that, but if you build affordable housing, as I understand, that will reduce your contribution for SIL. So if there were 40% of housing, that would be 4 or 5 houses of affordable housing, which would reduce that by, reduce the 33,000 significantly anyway. But it's the rest of the values and why they mean that they're not going to be able to make £843,000 profit on the application.
So in terms of the affordable housing, the value of affordable housing is less. So that's an impact on the numbers. The DBS does, these are the numbers in terms of they do the calculations, so they do various calculations in terms of a policy compliance scheme, and they do calculation of policy compliance scheme and variations in between of what could be provided. At one point, I was working with the DBS on these calculations. We thought a cash contribution would be possible, but that turned out to be an error in the calculation, so that wasn't possible. So the DBS goes through the various different variations that could be provided. In terms of the profit, the 17.5% is a standard set out in the planning guidance, and the planning practice guidance sets out 15 to 20%. 17.5 is obviously the average of that, and that's a standard target profit for developers to work towards. In terms of the existing use value, obviously the applicant has calculated that to be just above 1.6. The DBS do their own research into recent sales values and the the existing property itself, what it's sold for previously, they include indexation. I've been through all that research with the DBS and the conclusion of 1.6 million of the existing use value. I've worked with the DBS to agree that number. And the benchmark land value is the existing use value plus 15%, which is again set out in the planning practice guidance as to how to calculate benchmark land value. So it's the existing use value plus premium. And then the residual land value, which is what you measure against the benchmark land value to understand if it's viable or not, is the gross development value, so the 4.8 million minus all the development costs and profit margin. So in terms of the development costs, they've used the median build cost rate. I've also been through all the other development costs with the GBS. I've consulted my colleagues and senior officers in the planning team who also deal with viability matters and major applications, and I've agreed that gross development value and those costs with the DBS, and then the calculations then. The residual land value being lower than the benchmark land value is the indication that it's not actually viable. Does that help?
In some ways, yes, but it seems to be a very complicated way of working out whether developmental profit or not.
Yes, it is.
The target profit is 843,000. What might have been more useful is to get a calculation that says, these are development costs, these are what you can sell it for, and that's your allowed profit, and then vary that by adding in a number of affordable houses into the scheme. So if you build one house, it drops the profit by that. If you build two, it drops it by that. And is that seems to me to be the simplest way of rather than what is a very technical and very strange way of doing it.
This process is set out by planning practice guidance, and this is how we have to calculate it. It's the government standard way of doing it, and it's all done in line with the Royal Chartered Institute of Surveyors as well. So this is the process we have to use. It's a complicated process. I appreciate that. It takes me a long time to get my head around all of this, and I have to do it every time I do an application. So this is the process we have to use based on planning practice guidance.
Okay. I used to work for the division, it's many years, so I understand some of it. But yeah, okay. It's fine. It suggests to me that PPG wants to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Go on.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think slide 34, including it, please.
Apologies, I didn't have to probably under this. Here.
It's 13 pages long.
That's absolutely fine. Just the overall suggested image. Bob Chestnut and mine, and members have sat around here for a long time with me on planning committees will know that this is a favourite of mine. It's access and parking. Because having lived in a development not dissimilar to this for 35 years now, one of the conditions set at the time it was granted was that there should be no parking in the access roadways. That was covenanted by the developer. There were parking spaces at each property and garages in some cases, and there was one visitor space for originally 11 properties. That's held up very well over 35 years. It's an unadopted road, therefore you can't really go the eyes down, but people are respecting it on the whole. But the main reason for that was access for emergency vehicles. So a couple of questions, please. Is this road going to be adopted? My first question. I'll answer that on the first.
No, it won't be adopted. It's a private road.
Okay, and can you just remind me, Naomi, through you, Chairman, what the parking arrangements were? I think you said it's 2 spaces per house. The requirement and the policy was to have 3 visitor spaces. Is that correct?
The guidance is to have 3 visitor spaces.
Where are they then, please?
As presented, I mentioned that the 3 visitor spaces were provided, but given there's 2 parking spaces per dwelling and potential for on-street parking, the proposed parking is considered acceptable.
Okay, so the on-street parking, it doesn't look very wide. Have we got a width of the roadways? I think
In
that
that,
access
as you said,
fire brigade and possibly other emergency vehicles. And then we go on to the one about, I can go on a bit about waste collection, please.
Also, I don't have the with the roadway to measure it. Do you want to discuss waste collection while I get the measure?
Well, yes, once we get that out of the way, anyway. I know the Waste Partnership said it is possible. If it's a private road, I know they're always reluctant to go down those because the insurance issues and so on. And again, using my example, I'm sorry, because I mean, this is a real live example. I've lived with it. We have a communal bin store. We don't have our own bins. We have the bins provided by Dorset Waste Partnership at the entrance to our little development. And it serves 17 houses, but originally it served 11 houses. And it's quite convenient because the van and the delivery collection vehicle can pull up and reverse in from the main road, which is Poole Road, quite a busy road, not unlike on the Burn and collect it from near the entrance. We don't have to take bins down there, but we use those bins. So I would prefer to see that as an option because I can envisage issues of overflow parking. It will happen. 2 spaces per house is adequate in many cases, but we can't see ahead. And if you have visitors and maybe 2 per household, you're in trouble straight away. So I'm worried about that, and I think that needs to be looked at again.
So in terms of that, I mean, the waste storage is within each individual dwelling. The collection will be curbside collection within the development, and the Dorset Council Waste Partnership have no objection to it.
Can I come back, Chairman? Yeah, I know they haven't got any objection, but that's fine if you haven't got cars parked there. But if you've got cars parked there, I would have thought it's simply you've got space. It looks as though you've got room to have it. And these bins, these communal bin stores are not over big. I mean, our one is probably 3 meters square, 3 or 2 meters. It holds sufficient individual bins. So now 17 houses, but originally it was 11 houses. It's much more convenient for everybody.
It would be possible to add a condition about waste management. Details of it, but the details of it are already submitted and accepted, so for it to be reviewed.
Difficult if it's already been. It's difficult if it's already been submitted. You could come up with a condition if you can think of some wording for that.
Okay, well, I think we'll come up with a condition and propose it to you at the end. Yep.
Yes, that's okay. Yeah, I'm happy with that, but I'm also still concerned about this parking. Can we condition no parking for residents?
Apologies, sorry.
Can we condition no parking in the access roads?
I believe so. I don't think it would be an issue to add a condition.
It's a private road, though.
There is an issue with enforcing it.
Well, I agree that's a private road. The issue would lie with the residents, but, you know, again, quoting the example, I'm sorry, Chairman, it has worked very well with a number of different residents over a period of 35 years. That principle, the residents tend to police it very well themselves. It works. So I would like to see that because what I hate to happen is the really story of the Preston Fire engine couldn't access them, probably the park corner because there were parked cars there.
I think if you look at the plan closely, Naomi, are you able to zoom into this? But
It's the only one I can actually on power. Yeah, so
you can probably see it better on the big screen than I can on the small screen, but there is an indicative HGV movement there from what is the waste vehicle, and you can see that it's a single track road. So if anybody parks on the road, it will be the residents, because it's just them that will be using it. And I'm sure it won't take long before someone comes out and complains, because it would restrict any movement whatsoever of anybody, not just emergency vehicles. It's too tight, and I think they would police it themselves.
Yeah, okay, Chairman, I mean, I accept that. Obviously, but yeah, okay.
Still the debate.
I just not happy with these arrangements still.
We'll see how the debate goes, and if you want a condition, we can add that condition in. David and then Alex.
I was actually going to continue the point, because the bin lorry shown there, if that's to scale, as you say, you can't get on past it. If you're parking on the road, if anybody parks on the road, you're preventing access by not only bin lorries, fire engines, ambulances, officers stopping access, because you probably couldn't get the car past if it was on. So that's a little track.
Yeah.
Maybe a small car business. I agree with the points that have been made. This is very, very exciting. If there's any parking on the road, you prevent, that's probably the key, because it's very difficult for a neighbour to go and knock on the door and say, "Oi, move your car." That's quite a hard thing to do. If it's private estate, there's no other enforcement available. I really do think this is very tight, without some way of enforcing no parking on the roads.
Hi, Councillor. Yeah. What was the question?
I was simply observing that without a way of enforcing no parking on the roads, anything bigger than a car, you're unable to get past another car parked on the road. So that's not just bin lorries, but ambulances, fire engines. And your car trucks are a little bit wide, they might be. So there could be all sorts of problems. And it's how can we enforce no parking on the road without relying on peer pressure, which is quite difficult to get. So that's.
Just to come back with the count on the privately managed road, in planning terms, we can't.
So the design isn't particularly brilliant.
Or in terms of the management of the developments, it needs to be addressed within the management development, which is beyond the remit of planning application.
All the roads are wider.
We have what we have before us. If it's not acceptable, then you know what you can do about that. But we can't redesign what's in front of us on the hoof.
I accept that. It's just it leads towards a conclusion to do with this application.
Let people mull over that, and we'll move on to the next speaker, and that's Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions first. Looking at, you've got the right map up, which is good. As you come in, you have the trees I'm assuming you're coming in, the trees to the left of you. Do the gardens of, I assume it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So do the gardens of 3 and 4, can you put your cursor, which is 3 and 4? I assume it's that. That's 1 and 2. Okay, 3 and 4. do they actually include the trees in their gardens? Okay, right. The area between 3 and the entrance, okay, with the garden of 3 and the entrance, those trees are whose property? Are they in a garden or are they just open space? Communal space. Okay, so under those trees, is the planting designated? I didn't really, because the tree cover is so big, you can't see what underneath planting is. Is that, is that to be planted? Retain trees, it says replaced with native species. I'm assuming rhododendrons will be replaced with something else. Is that what I'm looking at?
So the details of the landscaping in condition.
Okay, but they haven't been submitted yet.
There has been some landscaping details submitted, but due to concerns about non-native species, we've conditioned it.
Okay. I'm just wondering if that area under the trees, before you get to the garden, is effectively where people are going to pull their cars off the road. Is it fenced, planted tight, or informal grass?
So in terms of existing, it's fenced, so it's difficult to see what is behind it.
Okay.
In terms of the proposed landscaping, we still need those details. If fencing is required, it's something that we can look for in the landscaping details.
I was just thinking that that area under the trees might be a place that a bin store accessible to the houses, maybe a logical place. So that's something that I'm thinking about. As you come in and round past the garden, I assume is that the back garden of number 3 or is that their parking space?
Here.
Yeah, that corner there.
That is parking.
That is parking. I couldn't decide which slide was most helpful on this one. So is that's a hard edged planting, a car parking space, or?
Yes, it would be hard surfacing for the car parking, and then pockets of landscape in between, as identified with the trees.
Quite small, yes. So it is feasible that your bin lorry could sort of go over that corner, going around the corner.
The tracking for the bin lorry is identified on the plan.
Yes, I see. But if the tracking for the bin lorry, if there was a car parked in that space, would the bin lorry be quite likely to bump into it? Or would it actually be a helpful space because the bin lorry could sort of go over the curb and use it? I just want to sort of get a picture of how this is actually going to handle in real life. So I was just thinking, does that give us a little bit of leeway, as in, all right, they'll be going onto private parking, but could an ambulance get round that corner?
A 3-axle bin lorry can get around that corner, and an ambulance is much smaller than a 3-axle.
Yes, but could it get past the bin lorry?
The lorries there at the time of the ambulance.
We're in trouble. Okay, right. My next question is, what are the height of those trees along the front, fronting Ringwood Road?
I don't know the exact height, but I can show you the picture again.
I've seen the picture, but from the picture, I needed a man standing underneath so I could do the sort of 6-foot thing.
I can show you the street scenes, which shows the properties side. So the existed light blue line is the existing apartment block.
Yeah.
And then you can see the trees above them. And the only thing is that that's not a tree
Exactly,
survey.
that's not a tree survey. Okay.
In terms of the trees on that is Ringwood Road. This is the existing access. So some of them are, here's the lamppost, for example.
Yep.
And the car parked in front of it, are substantial.
Generally speaking, you can imagine that they're 20 metres or more high.
Generally, I don't.
I'm just looking at them, because I do this sort of thing. But the back gardens or the distance between the trees and the houses is only 19 metres.
18 to 22.
80 to 22.5. Okay. Are there TPOs on these trees? There are. Okay. What is the crown height? Is it in the? I didn't notice it in the tree officer's report all day. I didn't find section. I'm just considering. Yes, they are TPO'd now. There's quite a lot of them. If any fell, we are talking about damaging the houses. And my worry, it's not a query to you because you obviously can't know, we can't know, but these are mature, some of them mature pines, bearing in mind some of the weather we've had in the last year, if not 2 or 3 years. I'm just thinking in terms of damage from the trees coming down, limbs coming down, and therefore, should we say the future of these trees? Because it would be very easy for a householder to actually ask to have one down or seriously crown locked.
With the greatest of respect, it's
I know.
not a material planning consideration. And if we took that attitude with every single house in, I won't say just East Dorset, but the whole of Dorset, I don't think we would have any houses built because we are very lucky to have so many trees.
Yeah.
So I think I must ask you to move on to your next point.
Okay. Okay. I have issues with the tightness of it, particularly the bins and the lorries, but that isn't in itself a planning consideration. Thank you.
Okay, my next speaker is John Worth.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. We've obviously had quite a lot of discussion about on-street parking, etc., and the tightness of the site. But on-street parking is being encouraged because there is no visitor spaces. So it will happen despite anybody's reservations and thinking about residents policing things. If they have visitors and they've already got 2 vehicles, then those visitors have nowhere else to go but to park on street.
Robin, you wanted to come back?
Yes, Chairman, I apologise if I opened up a can of worms here, I think, with this one, but I think it's important. I mean, real life is real life, things happen, and, we look at developments such as this, which actually, as you see it, I think would look better on that site than what's there already. So, I'm not against the development, but I'm trying to manage a process, if you like, that we can manage going through. Now, there's been some question about how do we police parking, etc. Well, as I understand it now, that's going to be a private road and there's going to be communal grounds. So there'll be a management company looking after that, with the responsibility of that. Now, whether that will be run by the residents or whether it will be farmed out to a company, I don't know. But that's your policing method, if you like. And I'm quite happy to talk outside this meeting to anybody how it worked, having run the management company for my development for 25 of those 35 years.
Can I just interrupt you? On the landscaping slide, it does actually say that the communal hatched areas that you saw around the edge of the site will be under the jurisdiction of the house owners collectively, not a separate management company. It'll be down to the residents to manage.
Yeah, I gather that it's a similar principle. So I think with the private road and the parking, the same. There will be the maintenance issue of the private road. That will be a shared responsibility, etc. So there will be some form. And I don't want to take up the rest of the time as media. I've taken it up already. I'm quite happy to talk outside of this to anybody that might be interested how it works. But the policing would be, you said somebody says self-policing. The management company, it's not a case of knocking on doors. If you get a persistent offender or offenders, a regular polite letter out to every household can actually work wonders, surprisingly enough. Just pointing it. And if they wanted a covenant, if the developer wanted a covenant, parking in the communal roads, he could do so, which adds a little bit more weight to this idea of policing as you waive the covenant issue. So I would like that strengthened, and I like the bin condition.
I've got bin condition.
Okay, if you are done on the parking for the moment, the officers have got a draft condition for the bin storage. Alex, can you turn your microphone off, please? So if members are happy, I'll get her to read that.
Members, this is the Bins petition. It was Street in Vaughan, so we're going to suggest the same wording as one of this.
Which number of these streets? Sorry, Chairman.
2023, East Street. Was it? Okay. It was delegated, but it's one we these people on. I've suggested the same wording, and I read out prior to the first occupation of the dwellings, details of storage for refuse and recycling, together with the access to it, including details for private refuse collection solution, to be submitted to and agreed in writing by the local planning authority. Storage should be provided in accordance with the agreed details before the development is first occupied and thereafter retained and approved. Furthermore, and unless agreed in writing with the local planning authority, the approved private refuse collection solution to be retained in perpetuity. And the reason for that condition is in the interest of highway safety, visual amenity, and the amenities of future occupiers of the development.
Just a slight amendment, Kim, it would be, we would refer to private refuse collection because of Dorset Waste.
It's going to do it.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. Always the issues by making something.
That's fine. There's tablets on site. Just remember the numbers 20 and 23. Yes, next.
Are you happy with that as an additional condition?
Yes, no, I'm happy with that. The way that's worded.
Not that we have a proposal yet.
No, if we get a proposal, that's the wording is, I think, perfectly adequate on that. Thank you.
Let me write it down. I'll forget in the heat of debate. Okay, so David, you wanted to come back again?
Separate point. So looking into a path, the applicant is prepared to accept a reduced commencement time period. This is commencement. Commencement is normally 3 years, and they'll drop it down to 18 months. But as I understand it, all commencement means is you dig a trench. Because we've had that in a development near me where it's now standing over 10 years. The developer dug a trench within the 3-year time period, and that secures their application in perpetuity. So I don't understand why a reduced commencement time period will secure certainty that the applicant would build out the permission in a timely manner. I don't think it does that at all necessarily, unless you can explain to me how digging one trench and then leaving it for 10 years goes the application.
Well, just to say that in terms of the 106, the viability review, which Councillor Bartlett has requested, we could do it on by a percentage of the completion of the development rather than a commencement. Normally with a development of this size, it's only 12 units, we would only do a completion for a larger scheme. But I don't think there's a legal reason we can't specify completion of a certain percentage with viability review.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got a couple of comments to make very briefly, which I hope I'm not going to enter into another debate on, and then I'm going to make a proposal, with your permission. So first one is, and as with Councillor Cook, we come to this table sometimes with a bee in our bonnet about certain things, and as is known, mine is about water drainage and flooding with the climate change problems that we've got, that we seem to be always in a position where the flooding is taken care of by officers after we've made a decision. I've always had a concern about that. The onus is on us as members to make the democratic decision, but we don't see the detail of the flood mitigation works that we've put in place on the development site, or how water drainage is going to be accommodated within the site. And I notice there is some discussion about SUDS in this, and you preemptively, Ms. Jenkins, by putting that up on the wall. Thank you. So that's that one done. The other one, of course, is, as we discussed in roads, and another bee in my bonnet is, as you know, is about road layouts and not being built to an adoption standard. I think this is where developers cut corners. They do it on the cheap. It's then left for the developer to maintain it at a later date, or for a management company of the residents to maintain it. As we as a planning committee have got no guarantees of the future of that or how it's going to look. It's not within the council provision, and we could be creating third world ghetto type areas because those roads aren't maintained. So having got those both off my chest, Madam Chairman, thank you for indulgence. I'll move to the proposal, which is the 3-year option with the Section 106 agreements in terms of the viability. Wording concerning the conditions referring to parking in the roads, and that wording to be done by officers and to be agreed by the chairman. To also take into account the wording in terms of the bin storage areas, Madam Chairman, and the other conditions that are laid out in the report. And I propose that, Madam Chairman, if it's acceptable to officers.
There will be an issue with the parking of the road counting forces, and that's an requirement. But we could put an informative on the officer report.
But come back.
Would you accept an informative?
Madam Chairman, yeah, I fully appreciate and I understood that it couldn't be enforced. So I'm happy with informative, yeah. Thank you.
I'm sure as the agent is listening to the debate that the point about a covenant, I hope, will not fall on deaf ears, and maybe they will look at that as they move forward with their proposals. Okay. So do I have a seconder? Robin?
Yes, I'm happy to second with the conditions as set out and the informative note, and I understand that, but I think we've covered those points. But I'm happy to support the development as a whole, because I think it's quite a, it'll look tidier and nicer in that area, actually. So, yeah, otherwise, no problem.
Can I ask both proposer and seconder? You've asked for the 3-year option with Section 106 regarding viability. Is that on a commencement or on a construction percentage? Those are the 2 options that the officer provided. Or do you want that delegated to officers?
Being not an expert in the field, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to delegate that decision. Just easy way out.
Okay, so just to recap, we have a recommendation to approve as per the agenda. However, rather than having condition 1 that's printed in the agenda, we would replace that with the 3-year option plus Section 106 regarding viability, the method of that viability to be delegated to officers, and we would add an extra condition on bin storage. And the second part, thank you, losing the plot here, is that if the legal agreement is not signed within 6 months from the date of this committee, then permission is refused unless time is extended by agreement by the head of planning. Okay, so are members clear with what you're voting on? In that case, I will put it to the vote. Those in favour, please. 1, 2, 3. Those against? 1. Abstentions? 1. So that is carried. Thank you very much. Do a quick changeover as we move on to agenda item 9.
Oh, which one is this? Which one is this? This is school.
While we're doing the changeover, it's 10 to 1.
Madam Chairman, because I think you can do it anyway. You can suggest for an extension to the meeting. So it's
Rather than wait till we're halfway through the next application,
Could we have 5 minutes?
I am going to ask members if you are happy to carry on. We have the Pamphill School application, which is the next one. And then the last application is Sandy Lane, Upton. We have 2 more applications and we have 10 minutes. Do members wish to adjourn the meeting at 1 o'clock? Do you wish to carry on? Do you wish to have a lunch break?
Should we adjourn for 15 now?
Can you put your microphone?
Oh, sorry. I would ask, could we adjourn for 10, 15 minutes now and then start again, or does it have to be a longer lunch break?
We have some members of the
Yeah,
public
exactly.
here.
10 minutes would be.
I'm in your hands, members. Shane.
Madam Chairman, I would suggest we have an adjournment just 5 minutes, and well, the officers are getting ready anyway, and then we suspend hand orders and continue to the end of the meeting till 2 o'clock.
I will do a 10-minute to 1 o'clock.
And carry on.
So at least if you want to get a cup of coffee rather than just a comfort break. And then we will resume and go forward to the end of the meeting. Can I have a show of hands, please, that you agree with that? Yep, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. I'll see you at 1 o'clock sharp. If you're not sat at your desk, I'll carry on. Yeah. That's who it is.
Charlie gets to. Really small.
It's grade 2 listed. Yeah. But it's grade 2 listed. That's very prescriptive on what you can and can't do. It's not we want.
There is a policy for it, so I think we'll tell you about
The shiny stuff. Yeah.
Most intention.
Yeah.
These are always interesting, I think. That last one, I think,
Get into
a bit harder than
then it just get access to anything as well. Once it may be inconvenient, it's not the reason for us to. The ambulance service and fire service is good to all reasons we can't diffuse them on the sprays, but I was trying to get somebody to measure. Yeah, I stopped the debate. Testing. Sorry, I didn't step in. But what I've asked the team to do in future is a question of measure. The person who is best is the officer.
Yeah, I mean,
And if we get the measurements, would be somebody needs to measure.
we lived through that.
Yeah, won't it? And next time, know how high the trees are.
Yeah. Not climb up one.
I'll bring my measuring tape. Yeah.
It's always good to rest. Ease something.
Yeah. Thanks, Naomi.
And anything. Yeah. Time now to go get a drink.
What do you want? I'll get you.
Need for the move building, so.
So you've got time to do it?
No, but we knew that there's something.
You can't start without you.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm tough on everybody else. I can't then take liberties.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Stage about the park.
Yeah, almost feels that matters, wasn't it?
Unfortunately, there's only one, oh no, there's three. There's three. What? So there's nothing in Swanage.
Yeah.
Safety.
But I think as a committee,
School up.
and I think it's one of those questions, isn't it? Well,
But no, just
Shock and horror when you get a question you haven't expected. Not allow it to come across in your face.
or something like that.
And they're not doing the
But I do think when the.
Some others said that. It's,
to express it. Very true. I have to try and keep it very.
And it's got to be listed where they're like. Yeah.
they always take us by surprise. And the problem is they're in danger of being a sensible debate, taking you down a tangent that you can't really back yourself.
Not just getting down, there's getting around and getting out again.
My favourite one.
Yeah.
It
Might
was
have been said, yeah.
It was a strategic issue.
This guy, God's sake.
Each one to-
I mean, it's still self-marketing as well, so get a market.
And then it's get not driving. Is that,
Yeah.
what I think is going up into this place and flying the drone over the site. And the officer should have said, as a particular fire expression, it's drone flying is covered under separate legislation. The wrong, didn't know how to answer it, so really stumbled because we're so shocked by the question that it, having gone through all the wattage that we get, all the archaeological, all the
Comes out of
other
the, the set the missile. it comes
what
out
you
of
do, the
everything.
drone flies over the site, and he said, I didn't know. But it's, yeah. Right, Liz?
Yeah, I've just got the minutes for David.
Oh,
Well done, mate.
Have you printed those up this morning?
And I forgot my folder to actually press them.
But you pass it.
Vicky's, who's the lady whose application Liz is presenting, these names of this. You all sorted in your handwriting? Yeah. Sorry, this one.
You did sugar fix.
Yeah.
For free of yeah. I draw the code.
Just remembered. Would you like that?
I have a box.
Yeah, what's our peppermints?
What happened because you were there to do this? And by trying to do it, I
10 peppermints.
It's made up for you. Oh, thank you.
Where's our peppermint tin?
Oh, no. Didn't
Did COVID put me to it?
we,
Look, David had.
didn't you keep it?
Yeah.
I think I forgot about it.
David's there.
David. Where's the peppermint tin?
On the full long-term assets. That's the idea was to. They went not long-term.
I really, you took it to say keep it. Why don't you say? It is long.
Some of them mark.
Well, I'm sorry, that's not
Yeah, don't have to do CPR on
Don't worry. I will resurrect it for next time. Find the tin, I'll bring the mints.
David's mind.
I'm not.
Thank you, that's very well.
If it's going to be that time.
When you can't score this to, well, I'm not quite sure what you do. There's nothing in planning or legislation.
Less roads, but Checkfield one.
So it's even I understand the full restoration, really open space, and then the management company goes
Oh, I've got one in Berwick.
first, and then it comes back to us to sort out.
Yeah.
You know, we prefer everything to be managed best. We've got all these signs now that are privately managed. What's going to happen later down the line? So, you know, those are the values. You've got to work with the legislature.
That would be worth having, but it isn't, is it?
I'll stay till I used to live on. Actually, there's no real parking.
I mean, they could develop a one
Very narrow.
It's amazing how sometimes things just go on. Other times, weather.
Built in the mid-80s. It's gone bust.
Yeah.
We now it's part of the grass cutting, but we don't own it.
And we do lots of maintenance to the land, which isn't, or isn't council owned.
Okay.
So in Berwick, I was writing to Councillor Gibson about land has come up for auction, right in the middle of. But it's all section 106 to be maintained and retained.
That's really grateful for that.
But how dare you think that they should just put
Has planning permission anyway.
Wasn't it? And I had bells ringing all over the place.
and we found it. I did in a later, you know, the problem with those, they're done in so many phases. But then there's a later agreement that just repeated what I said in the original one. So I sent him that. And the town council were made aware. So all the calls, they're marshalling people to ring into the council.
Didn't sell at auction. At auction with a price tag of £5,000.
And this has come to a land changes. Somebody could it worked. But then there was another one that came in. It wasn't really Burwood, but they'd already sold it by auction when they asked us the question. Which time it based on that one. The local sort of attention to finding out.
Oh, sometimes.
Hey, Dave,
You do, don't you?
sign off for planning if you want. I can always resign off for planning. if you
Ladies
want.
and gentlemen, it is 3 minutes past 1. I got sidetracked myself. We need to reconvene the meeting, please. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item 9, 320-1725 LB, replacement of 4 windows at Pampill BCCV First School in Pampill, Wimborne. And who's taking it? Oh, I'm sorry.
Do we have to have it? Or no, we had a hand raised, didn't we?
Sorry, Claire Hicks will be taking us through this presentation. Can we have one conversation, please, members? Thank you. Over to you, Claire.
This building application comes before members because Dorset Council is the applicant. Pampill First School lies to the north of Vinehill and is located 2.5 miles from Wimborne to the southwest. Application site consists of a small school set in a rural location close to Pampill Green. The main school building is previously listed and the site is within the Pampill Conservation Area and the Green. You can see here the windows which are proposed for replacement, as the existing ones are written and cannot be opened at the moment, so you fail to provide adequate ventilation.
Windows A and B serve a reception class space. Windows C and D serve a same floor class space. A security consent is required and the fabric of the building is being changed. The replacement of the four proposed windows is acceptable in principle, and acceptability of the proposal is to be assessed in respect of whether the design and detailing of the replacement windows will preserve the historic appearance and integrity of the strange listed building. The proposal is to replace four of the windows in the building with timber framed windows or similar appearance, finished in white satin. On the front elevation, the windows either side of the entrance door are highly visible in the conservation area and make a significant contribution to the design and character of this building. These windows are of classical proportions, taller than they are wide, with square heads and central mullin and transom, and are of historic and architectural interest. But they are in a poor condition and it is not possible to salvage existing units. It is proposed to install replacement single glazed windows which match the existing windows as closely as possible. Double glazing would not be appropriate, but the windows are designed to be vastly thicker than usual in order to achieve a similar thermal efficiency than a double glazed unit. The southwestern elevation is a more modern section to the rear of the main building, and in this context, the proposed two ultra-slim double glazed windows can be complete. The proposal is judged to be acceptable, subject to conditions showing precise and appropriate window details. The proposal is successful and will not result in any harm to the designated heritage asset that is the listed building, and it will preserve the character and setting of this building, as defined by Section 66 of the Planning of this Building and Conservation Areas Act 1990. The recommendation is to grant planning permission, subject to conditions, as set out in the agenda report. Thank you.
It's fairly straightforward. I have no public speakers on this, so Shane, you want to start the debate?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, that's the reason it's been said. The only reason it's come to this committee due to the fact that we own the asset as Dorset Council. So I got no hesitation really in proposing that we grant this application and also surrounding the conditions that are laid out within the officer's report. Thank you to the officer for the presentation. And my understanding is we don't actually have a policy. It's not as if we can use UPVC on a grade 2 listed building. So I'm happy to go with the recommendations that are in the report, unless I've got that wrong.
It was just going to come back on that.
That's correct. We went back to the conservation officer on that specific point, and the response is that not only are UPVC windows not sustainable in terms of their manufacture, but they are not appropriate on a building of this form. The Historic England's guidance on modifying historic windows as part of retrofitting and energy saving measures. On their webpage, it says that Historic England, we recognise the urgent need for climate action. We believe that England's existing buildings have an essential role to play in fighting climate change. And they've gone to say that older buildings have survived because of their durability and adaptability, continuing to adapt, upgrade, repair and maintain them. So they remain useful and makes good social, economic and environmental sense. And that replacing the windows with wood and ensuring that the glazing itself is thick enough means that their thermal efficiency would be the same as if you got a plasticized window frame, which would not maintain the integrity of the listed building, particularly on the front with regards to the appearance of the conservation area. Hope that answers the question. Probably fuller than you'd hoped, but thank you.
You want to come back on that?
Thank you, officer. Every day's an education, and I stand by my original proposal. Thank you.
Robin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's in my ward, and very proud of Panfield First School. It's a lovely little building, a lovely little school, and very happy to second this proposal to keep the integrity of the building.
I've no other speakers. Alex?
Although you've already got a proposer and seconder, can I just comment that I'm very pleased that they're going forward. I just hope that it's going to a local craftsman to build these replacement windows so as to keep our local skill base going.
I'm sure that that will get fed back, although it's not material planning consideration. Okay, so I've no other speakers. It's been proposed and seconded for grant. Those in favour, please. Unanimous. So that's granted. Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. Our last item today is agenda item 10, and that is PHOU 2022-1307. And that's to square off the front of the property, erect a rear extension with addition of new first floor accommodation to converted roof space with new dormitory side elevation at 54 Sandy Lane, Upton. And Liz is going to take us through that one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So members, the final item for today is, as has been explained, the extensions at 54 Sandy Lane, Upton. And you'll all be aware of Upton, as I'm sure, about major accommodation in the former Purbeck area. And number 54 sits in a row of mainly bungalows, or there's chalet bungalows further up the road, and then two-story properties opposite. And the reason that it is before you today is because of concerns about the impact on the amenity of the property to the rear, which is number 28 Green Acre. So the dwelling is currently a two-bedroom property, and it's proposed to square off front, the existing, and add a approximately 3 metre rear extension, and then create an apex roof over the top. The proposed first floor would include 3 bedrooms and a more suite and bathroom. These are the street view photos before work started on the property. The application site and its neighbours, as you can see here, are elevated from the highway, but their visual impact is reduced by their setbacks, approximately 10 metres, with areas of car parking in front. So the proposal will introduce a front gable, which I've explained, and a box dormer, increasing the ridge height by approximately a metre and above the roof. But in the context of the street scene and the varying dwelling designs, the officers judged that the proposal will appropriately integrate within the street scene. There is another application under consideration at the moment for the same design, which has raised no objection because it doesn't have the rear windows that are this sort of contention. So the existing and proposed side elevations demonstrate how the extended property would work with the land levels. It's proposed to install obscure glass in the door or windows. These both have bathrooms, so that's an interest of the amenity. And that's condition 4 on page 33 of your agenda. And then on the other side, facing number 56, there's 4 roof lights proposed, 2 for each of the bedrooms seen here. And they will face the roof of number 56 rather than to the amenity space. Here we see the property prior to works commencing, and here you can see the roof light in number 56. Now, it's not understood that currently facilitates any recognised living area, but because it is there, it's considered necessary to ensure that the potential overlooking from this window to show the red circle around it would be avoided, and therefore an additional condition in addition to those already on the agenda has been proposed under that should be obscure glazed unless the sill height is at least 1.7 metres from the finished floor level. After that, space that it wouldn't be. So that would leave the bedroom with only one roof light providing outlook,
But given that the requirements of the permitted development order are that if you add windows above above ground floor height to a property, they have to be either obscure glazed or high level, and this is not an uncommon situation. And the officers consider it would still provide acceptable living space for that bedroom. So the main objection is, as I say, for number 28 to the rear. That property has previously been extended. In here with a garage and this kitchen window. The proposal will introduce a rear gable approximately 15 metres directly from the building. And so that's well within the 21 metre separation distance that the Berwick District Design Plan suggests. But within this area of relatively high density, and due to a pre-existing relationship with boundary screening, and the unique nature of overlooking from the easternmost window, the officers consider that clear glazing of the third floor window to the east would not lead to unacceptable overlooking at number 28. It's recommended that the western window, which I'll show you in a minute, is obscure glazed, be secured by condition 3. So we're talking about this window here with the red line around it being obscure glazed, and then the other window, which provides symmetry, is open and for the development the amenity of future occupants of the dwelling. So the windows in number 28 basic application site serve their lounge, dining room and kitchen. These photos were taken from the scaffolding that's currently up around the extended ground floor of the dwelling. So they do give a realistic idea of what officers consider as limited potential for overlooking. It's noticed that the height of the boundary panels has been bolstered. So if this was removed, then the top of the windows of the main property would be evident. So here we believe that the kitchen window is behind here, and then we've got living room lounge windows behind here. And then on the next slide, I've got some pictures from the neighbour's property, which were taken prior to work starting and prior to the increased height of the boundary fence. The officers accept that there may be a perception of overlooking arising from the first floor window. Here. But with the western window to be obscure glazed, it's judged that overlooking will be sufficiently offset to avoid demonstrable harm to the lounge, while overlooking to the kitchen will be limited. Fencing. So the level of harm is not judged to necessitate refusal. Just a few more photos to show the relationship with the rear of the adjoining properties. And there are some indicative drawings. So again, we'd be suggesting that this one is obscure glazed together with the bathroom window set. So to sum up, within the street scene, there's a variety of property forms, and the additions to the property are considered to appropriately integrate with the surroundings. It's recommended that an additional condition be added for the side window serving bedroom 3, and together with the other two obscure glazed conditions, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Liz. We have one public speaker today, and I believe that's Mr. Clive Bailey. Let's come forward. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Bailey.
I'll try. Madam Chairman, committee members. We purchased the house 14 or 15 years ago. First thing we noticed when we walked into the house was the size of the picture windows. They've got a low sill and they are a large window. The story behind this was when my house was built, there was nothing below on Sandy Lane. So I don't ever want to alter the windows. 54, 56 and 58. So we're the sort of people that go and knock on the door and say hello to a new neighbour, introduce ourselves. I'd noticed that there was a window in the rear of 56, a really sort of dilapidated DIY affair. Went and introduced myself to John and Jean, and in polite conversation asked about the window, because that window directly overlooks my two picture windows. They were in the late 70s at the time. John said, you don't need to worry in regard with that. He said, that's purely a loft, a roof space, and I have a model trainway set up there. And that's the only reason for the window being put in there. It's never been habitable. It doesn't have a staircase up to it, and it was a loft ladder. Planning condition relating to the two apex windows, to me, doesn't make sense. If we've got an apex window like this, and if I'm stood inside the bedroom, then what the report is saying is that if I stand in the main bedroom and look this way, it's not acceptable, right? And that needs to be obscured. If I move a metre to my right and look in the same direction, then this is considered completely different, according to the report. And that can be clear. I'm afraid I consider that to be a fudge. It's not a solution, it's a fudge. The person that agrees with that, or seems to, in the report or in the schedule, for the reason of sending it to committee, is Mr. Garrity, who I believe is head planner, and he refers to the appropriateness of obscure glazing in a main bedroom. So I presume that's why we're here. I don't agree at all with the condition. Within the report, it says clearly that the applicant has got a fallback plan in place already. This means extending his roof and the windows, whatever windows they may be, would be covered by permitted development. So the only logical thing I can see from this is that the east of the house has a dormer. I can only presume that what he's talking about, which wouldn't need any additional planning, would be to simply extend the dormer over the main bedroom, and that would provide him windows, but they would be facing east and not into my room.
Really? We've already overstepped by half a minute.
Okay.
I'll ask you to very briefly,
Yeah.
I mean very briefly, make your final comments, please.
Yes. I don't mind people making money. I don't mind housing being redeveloped. What I do want the committee to allow me to retain is my privateness, which I've enjoyed there for 15 years, and I don't really see, if there is an alternative available, why I should lose my privacy. I shouldn't. I shouldn't have to lose it. Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee members.
Thank you very much. Liz, is there anything you want to respond to the comments made by the member of the public?
I do mention that in respect of community development rights, the point in the officer report was that the existing ridge could be extended and again for the back room in it without planning permission. So it's just a full back and it's not going to be.
Okay. Alex, you said at the beginning of the meeting that you wanted to act as local member.
Well,
So here is your opportunity to say your piece.
I have to, though I have to admit, I'm always in a slightly baffled situation with this one. Most of the issue is because it's very hard to see what was originally there, because building work has already happened. The ridge height has already gone up, and therefore it's very hard to picture what it was like and what the difference is now or will be. That's the first thing. There have been several sort of iterations of this planning application. There's the permitted development possibility, which is not ideal. There is this one with the big apex window, and it would look, you know, most people have a 6-foot fence. They don't expect to have to build a 10-foot fence or anything ridiculous just for a bit of privacy, particularly on a boundary that's always been sort of a friendly boundary. This is not a prison. This is a house in Upton, which is, you know, people move to Upton because it's near to the coast, it's near to the harbour, and they can look out across to the sea or look across to the hills, the other side of the harbour. So by being enclosed, that really does impinge on your privacy. So I am concerned about this application. There was also an application which had, and I'm not quite sure of the status of that one, I hope the officer can enlighten us, that involved not having a gable window, but side dormers, which were slightly increased. Now, I have to admit, I want to know which version we are going back to if we refuse this, because I personally think this application with a large gable window like that, and if you've got a bedroom window that's that big, you are going to stand there and look out of it, because that's what they're for, windows usually. So I have a feeling that we are imposing on somebody's privacy for no particular great reason. It is a north-facing window, so it's not as though it's going to get any more solar gain into the house. We're expanding one bungalow, or we may be expanding one bungalow, very much to the detriment of the neighbour, very much to the detriment of privacy in that area, and also probably to the detriment. It will be a sort of copycat thing, and that other bungalows along there will also start thinking of, well, if they did it, why can't we? And we're in that precedent business. So I would ask you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Liz, is there anything you want to respond to on what's been said?
Just to say that, yeah, the other application is with officers. There's been no objections to it. It is basically the same form, but it has two roof lights serving the main master bedroom, one of which will probably need to be obscured as available, because otherwise it's going to overlook the rear garden of number 56. No, 182. Thank you.
Jane.
Sorry, the other application the officer just referred to, that's a completely different application of this property. Okay, I was just getting my head.
This is why it's confusing.
Yeah, okay. So could write down the slide number. I'm sorry, can you just bring up the meterage in terms of the looking from the window? How many meters is it the property that could be impacted? 18.5 meters.
Well, 50.
Okay. And those 8 buildings there, we had a Photoshop from that, and those 8 buildings don't obscure it.
Can I say something? No.
I'm sorry, sir.
Okay.
What you've had
Sorry.
your slot. I do understand it's difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult, because that's off the scaffold.
So at 18.5 meters, which is, I think, is a reasonable distance. And when I first had this application, I first saw it, I was struck by the bulk of the building, a few concerns around that. But then the character and nature of the road is made up of buildings of a different design, different shape, a different look, different frontages. And as I read through it, I've become more acceptable to the applications before us. I think that's all I want to say at this particular point in time, Madam Chairman. See how the debate goes. Yeah.
Next speaker is John Worth.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there any reason why both those windows can't be obscured glazed? Thank you.
And purely for amenity for future occupants, but then they'd have no outlook at all from there. But
You wish to come back?
Yeah. But surely we're looking at the immunity of the occupants of the property that will be looked into and the potential to look into. So I can't see why we can't make it conditional that both of those are obscure glazed. And then they could look at other alternatives for natural light, i.e. roof lights, bedroom.
Jane?
The problem we're faced with, Madam Chairman, is that I think the distance involved is sufficient to still afford privacy, and I take Councillor Worth's view about the skill base in both of them, and I'm almost minded to go along with that. You know, Madam Chairman, that we did look at a previous plan application that created a dungeon in Beer Regis, which I wasn't happy about at the time, and that had no daylight windows or whatsoever in it, and we approved that as a committee. In terms of this one, there is no material planning considerations as why we should be refusing this. The difficulty is over whether or not we're impacting sufficiently on the privacy of another resident. And I think if we were permitted to go with Councillor Worth's view that we could obscure glaze both windows, then I'm going to propose that with that condition, we go with that recommendation within the officer's report, reluctantly.
You are proposing grant with the condition that both of the windows in the elevation are obscure glazed. John, you want to come back?
Yeah, just that I'd like to second Councillor Bartlett's proposal that we grant the basis that both of those windows are obscured.
Okay. Did you wish to come back as officers? All right,
Thank you, Madam Chair. From an officer's perspective, if you're going to require both windows to be obscure glazed, then I think that would probably be an unreasonable condition, and therefore it should be a refusal rather than conditioned approval.
David?
I understand that it might be unreasonable to require both. But if it's necessary to obscure one, if you pull back the diagram of the first floor plan, the proposed first floor plan, I'm right in thinking that the two windows at the top of that, the two windows in question, is that right? And we're proposing that one of them needs to be obscure glazed and the other doesn't. They're both, it's effectively one angle. So one requires to be obscure glazing, shall we both do? If one doesn't, then shall we neither do? I just don't understand why one only.
Who wants to respond to that?
If I may, the assessment you're making is based on the distance and the orientation of those windows. So they both face at the back, but obviously they're in different positions on the building. So therefore the angle and the oblique angle for one is further away from the neighbour. So the judgment you're making is clearly here that if you consider that there is harm, notwithstanding the officer report, which has evaluated that harm and considers that the closest window could be obscure glazed because we can overcome the direct overlooking from that window. The officer assessment is that the second window is at a further distance and at a different angle of view. Therefore, on that one, it's acceptable without that. If members take the view that both windows would result with in harm as a consequence of overlooking, then members should be refusing the application. To obscure both windows in terms of the living conditions, I think one may be acceptable. In terms of what you're delivering as a development with two blank windows would be unreasonable in terms of us imposing that condition. If you think there's harm, then it's suggested that members would be refusing the scheme rather than trying to condition it. Thank you.
So I need to go back to the proposer and seconder. Giving the information that we've received from officers, do you wish to withdraw your proposal because it has been duly seconded, even though we haven't gone to the vote, and come back with another proposal? Or do you wish to put me in a great deal of difficulty and continue with it? Jane?
Also, Madam Chairman, it's a bit disappointing to be put into this position because I find myself in agreement with the member of the public that moving 1 metre to one side in the configuration layer that we've seen, I believe is completely right. You would still be able to see into the window at the rear property. So I don't see why we wouldn't be obscure glazing both windows. If the officers are now advising that to do that would be unreasonable in terms of the occupant of the building, we seem to have got to this stage and brought it all the way to committee with a sort of a contrived sort of fudge of trying to, not actually use as the member of this wording, but he did use it, the fudge of how we were going to accommodate this as a plan application in order to approve it. So on the basis of what the officer is saying, that it would be unreasonable to obscure both, then I think obviously the applicants need to go back and relook at it, and a different design proposal needs to come forward. So I will withdraw my proposal if it is not possible to obscure both glazes, and I'll wait to see what Councillor Worth says, but I would imagine that it could be to move to a refusal on it, I would imagine. Thank you.
I need to check with Robin Cook. Are you happy to withdraw the proposal because you seconded it, didn't you?
No, sure.
John, sorry.
It's okay.
Said it not this morning.
Thank you, Chairman. I know we look like twins, you know. I accept that. Yeah, I'm happy to withdraw my seconding of that proposal, but then I'm minded to propose that we refuse because I think there's demonstrable harm.
We're getting a little bit of help currently being done in the corner there. David, do you wish to come back? Or even speak? Sorry.
I can second the proposal to refuse based on overlooking.
Okay, we have a form of words that pick up on what both proposer and seconder are aiming for.
I'm going to have to read it. The proposed development would result in unacceptable levels of overlooking number 28 Greenacre Close from the first floor rear windows, resulting in harm to the immunity of the occupants of that property, contrary to policy B, permitted in part 1. 21.
Are proposer and seconder happy with those reasons for refusal?
Yes.
Any more debate? In that case, I will put it to the vote for refusal of this application. Those in favour, please.
Am I not allowed to vote now?
Not allowed to vote as you acted as a local member. So, oh, sorry, legal question.
Are you corporate?
We still call it.
Attending the
Yeah.
meeting.
I think so. Yeah.
Purposes
Yes.
of you for attending the
Okay.
meeting.
I thought I'd better double check that one quickly.
Yes, that's fine.
So we are still chorus. Just again, so that we're absolutely clear, being proposed and seconded for refusal, and that's unanimous. Thank you, members. So that application has been refused. That is the end of our planning application. That's the end of our planning applications for today, and item 11 on the agenda is urgent items, and you'll be very pleased to know we don't have any. So thank you all very much for your forbearance today, and we finish at 1:39. Thank you. Safe journeys.
Thank you.